Chapter 161, Wendy's Secret Place. William sighed for the umpteenth time as he gazed out the window of his dormitory room. Kenneth, who was seated on top of his bed, frowned as he observed the sighing boy who seemed to be feeling downhearted. Just what happened inside the dean's office? Kenneth thought. Does it have something to do with what happened inside the dungeon? Kenneth was very curious, but he also respected William's privacy. In the end, he decided to remind the sighing boy that it was almost time for dinner. "Will, let's have dinner," Kenneth said as he patted William's shoulder. William simply nodded his head and stood up from his chair. Ella decided to stay inside the room because she had already eaten. As the two made their way towards the dining hall, William felt a prickling gaze aimed in his direction. When William turned his head to see who it was, he noticed Spencer glaring at him from behind his back. If William hadn't heard Celine's tale, he might have already thought of a plan on how to make Spencer suffer. However, right now, he wasn't in the mood to deal with him. He unconsciously touched the collar on his neck and flinched. "The collar you wear on your neck right now was dyed with her own tears, blood, and suffering." Simon's voice echoed inside William's head. As William continued to walk to their destination, another image appeared inside his head. It was the time when Celine was about to place the collar on his neck and William was lying on the floor, paralyzed. Still, isn't this unfair? William tried to use reason. "Since when did life become fair?" Celine asked. Her expression gradually became cold as she looked down at the boy on the floor. "Little Will, you have no idea what fairness is. Life has never been fair. There are people who have to beg in order to live, and there are those that were born with a silver spoon on their mouth. Both are people, but their circumstances are like heaven and earth. William, the only one who gets to decide what is fair or not, is the one with the bigger fist." Celine's soft and delicate hand caressed William's cheek. "Right now, I have the bigger fist. Because I am stronger than you, I can bully you. This is the law of the strong." Celeste, William muttered the name of Celine's twin. The one who was favored by the elven race, and showered by their love and affection. Both of them were people, but their circumstances were like heaven and earth. William finally understood Celine's hate-filled ramblings that day. She was looking at William, as if she was looking at her 8-year-old self. Because the elven race was stronger than her, they could bully her. That was the law of the strong. The red-headed boy sighed and thought about the days of his training. This continued until he and Kenneth passed through the doors of the dining hall. William sat on his usual dining table and started to eat. However, for some reason, the food that used to taste delicious became plain and almost tasteless. Even so, William forced himself to eat. For he knew that he wouldn't be able to think straight with a hungry stomach. He chewed the food properly and ate 2 servings of vegetables. When he felt that he was half full, he excused himself and left the dining hall to take a stroll outside the premises of the Martial Division. William walked without any destination in mind. His mind was preoccupied with many things, and his feet moved as they pleased. As he wandered around aimlessly, a pair of soft hands suddenly covered his eyes from behind. "Make a guess," a teasing voice whispered in his ears. "The most beautiful girl in the Royal Academy," William replied. "Since you already know who I am, there's no need for me to do this," the girl stuttered as she removed the hands that covered William's eyes. The red-headed boy wasn't able to stop himself from grinning when he heard the familiar stuttering voice behind him. He then turned his head to look at the pretty young lady who was only half a head shorter than him. "Sir William, what are you doing here inside the magic division?" Wendy inquired. William blinked and scanned his surroundings. He found himself in an unfamiliar place. If what Wendy said was true, then he had somehow gotten past through the guards that were guarding the gates of the magic division. What William didn't know was that Est had specifically ordered the guards to allow William and Kenneth to enter the premises of the magic division class. When the guards saw William walking towards the magic division class, they thought that he had an appointment with Est, so they didn't bar his entry. Wendy observed the confused half-elf and a mischievous smile appeared on her lips. "Did Sir William come to check on how I'm faring?" Wendy asked. She was hoping that this was the reason for his visit. "Don't worry. I'm perfectly healthy. The clerics in the infirmary have already healed the minor bruises that I received from the dungeon." I see," William said with a stiff smile. "I'm glad that you're doing well." Wendy lowered her gaze as a blush crept up on her face. The two didn't notice that a few people were gathering around them. They recognized who William was because they had seen his performance during the exchange of pointers in the Colosseum. Some girls even took the initiative to greet him, which made the atmosphere very lively. "Head Prefect, did you come here to visit me?" "Duh. Why would he visit you?" "Head Prefect William came here to visit me. Isn't that right, Sir William?" The two girls were looking at William with starstruck gazes, which made Wendy feel irritated. "Actually, I came here to visit Wendy," William said as he held Wendy's hand. "The two of us plan to exchange pointers and learn from each other. Isn't that right, Wendy?" "Why yes," Wendy stuttered. "Sir William wanted to give me private lessons and train my body, teach me some techniques in order to fine-tune my magic power." "Unfair." "That's unfair, Sir William. Please, train us too? We can do it in my room if you like." "Sorry, but my hands are already full with Wendy," William apologized while trying to pry his hand away from the two girls who had grabbed his arm. If you ever get tired of teaching Wendy, feel free to find us." Before William and the girls could interact more, Wendy decided to drag the popular half-elf away from the scene. She didn't understand why she felt uncomfortable when the two pretty girls were trying to cling to William. William, on the other hand, was very thankful for Wendy's actions. He didn't know that he had already trespassed on another division's premises and wanted to get away from the crowd. Wendy brought William to the back garden of the magic division. Not many people came here at night, so they were safe from the prying eyes of the public. The young lady took William to her secret place in the garden. It was a place that could be accessed by moving the hand of the statue that was blocking its entrance. The two walked for a few minutes after they entered the secret passage. William didn't know where Wendy was taking him, but he could tell that the young lady didn't have any malicious intentions. Not long after, the two emerged from the passage. The red-headed boy's eyes widened when he saw the scene in front of him. Riyadh updated estierize at n/bell/bin.com. William saw an amazing sight. Instead of a sea of flowers, he saw a still lake where an aurora borealis floated above its surface. Several crystal butterflies fluttered above the lake's surface as their wings reflected the different colors that passed through the transparent water. If William were to describe this place in one word, it would definitely be the word surreal. A sweet smile appeared on Wendy's face when she saw William's reaction. She had discovered this place by accident, and no one else knew about this secret. William was the first person she had brought to this place, and seeing his amazed expression made her maiden heart skip a beat. Chapter 162, William's Story Part 1. The sloshing of water could be heard as William swam in the lake. The water was so clear and clean that William could see the colorful glowing crystals lying at its bottom. Although the water was slightly cold, William didn't mind it. He needed to cool down because the thoughts whirling inside his head were giving him a headache. After swimming freely for 15 minutes, he relaxed his body and allowed himself to float on the water's surface. This was the first time he had felt so relaxed and at peace after he entered the Halan Royal Academy. The red-headed boy felt so comfortable that he fell asleep while floating on the water. Wendy, who was looking at him from the lake shore, didn't know whether to laugh or cry at this development. She brought William to her secret place so that she could spend quality time with him. However, the boy was more interested in swimming in the water than talking to a pretty girl, such as herself. "This is the first time I've seen someone sleep while floating on a lake," Wendy muttered in disbelief. "Oh, no. He might accidentally drown if I don't do something." Wendy was torn. On one hand, she didn't want to disturb William's sleep. On the other, she was worried that her idol might drown if she let things continue as they were. In the end, she gritted her teeth and decided to use her second ability. Wendy lightly waved her hand, and the water around William rippled. Soon, the half-elf was slowly, but surely, being dragged to shore. Wendy was a dual affinity magician. Her strongest forte was the manipulation of metal, and the other was the control over wind. Ironically, her wind affinity only allowed her to use magic up to the first circle. The most she could do was create wind blades and manipulate the wind to do simple tasks, like bringing a handsome half-elf, who was half-naked, back to the shore. William's body was quite lean and toned for his age. He didn't have any ripped muscles, but his body excluded strength and power. One could even see the outline of his abs as he floated a meter away from Wendy. Fortunately, the boy was still wearing pants, or else, Wendy might have fainted due to embarrassment. Seeing that her idol was out of harm's way, Wendy decided to place a blanket where she sat and waited for William to wake up from his slumber. An hour passed, and soon, William finally opened his eyes. The first thing he noticed was a slight ache on his left shoulder. When he turned his head to the side to see what was causing the discomfort, the first thing he saw was a patch of blonde hair. He was still half asleep, so it took him some time to realize what it was. Wendy laid beside him and her hands were clinging onto his arm. She was sleeping soundly and a smile hung on her sleeping face. William's body immediately stiffened when he saw this scene. All his drowsiness was swept away by dread as he hurriedly inspected his body. "My pants are still on," William thought as he looked at his body. He then looked at Wendy. She still has her clothes on, which means that nothing has happened. Visit n0vl/bin for the best novel reading experience. The red-headed boy patted his chest with his right hand in relief. The last thing he remembered was swimming on the lake and feeling comfortable and at peace. He also remembered that he felt drowsy while he was floating on the water. The shepherd didn't remember anything past that point, so he assumed that Wendy decided to bring him back to shore for his own safety. "I was careless," William thought as he looked at the defenseless lady by his side. Wendy was only 15 years old, and yet, her body was developing in the right places. If not for the fact that William had been around his beautiful master, Celine, for 4 years, he might have already ogled the sleeping beauty beside him. William sighed as he nagged at Wendy inside his heart. The girl was so trusting of other people that he worried about her safety. If it were other boys, instead of William, Wendy might have already suffered losses due to her carelessness. "I better remind her not to be so trusting of people, especially those of the opposite sex," William thought as he shook his head helplessly. He then gently pried the soft hands that were holding his arm away, so that he could wear some appropriate clothes. Wendy frowned, the moment she lost contact with William's arm, but her eyes remained closed and her breathing steady. Right at the moment when William finished putting on his clothes, Wendy started to stir. The pretty blonde girl raised her head and looked around her in a daze. William smiled and crouched down to look her in the eye. "Good morning, Sleeping Beauty." "Good morning, Sir William." Wendy yawned, then raised her hands to do some light stretches. She was in the middle of stretching when she realized something important. "Head Prefect." Wendy stuttered as she hurried to stand up. Due to her actions, her legs gave way and it made her fall backwards. Fortunately, William was a step faster and supported her body to keep it from falling. Sorry, my bad. William apologized. Did I scare you? And no, I was just surprised, Sir William, Wendy replied as she placed a hand over her chest in an attempt to calm the heart that was beating wildly within her body. Can you stand? William inquired. And no, Wendy answered. My legs still feel weak and shaky. It can't be helped. Let's sit down first. Okay. When both of them were properly seated, William properly thanked Wendy for bringing him back to shore. He also admitted that he did something stupid and praised her for being quick-witted. Wendy listened to William's gratitude and praise with a smile on her face. She had managed to calm down and decided to use this opportunity to get to know this mysterious half-elf who made her heart skip a beat. Sir William, can you tell me more about yourself? Wendy asked. Are you really a shepherd? What is the name of your hometown? Do you have brothers and sisters? Do you already have a lover? Wendy asked a barrage of questions. She even added the question that she was most curious about at the end. William organized his thoughts as he prepared his answers to Wendy's inquiry. He had already noticed that Wendy was quite different from her big brother, Spencer. Spencer was someone who was calm and collected, and most of his thoughts lay buried inside his chest. He would often show a face of calmness and only react when he was dealing with Drake or anything related to his twin sister. Wendy, on the other hand, was a very straightforward person. She wore her emotions on her face and it was very easy to read what she was thinking. Even so, William didn't dislike this kind of person. He looked at her bright blue eyes that were filled with anticipation and a tinge of anxiety. Instead of answering her question, William began to tell her about his hometown, Lant. I grew up in the town of Lant, which is located at the farthest edge of the western part of the Hellan kingdom, William said with a smile. The life there is crude, which is very typical for those who live in the countryside. Even so, it is a place that is very dear in my heart. William paused as he looked at the aurora that was dancing on top of the lake. Throughout my childhood, I was always under the care of my Mama Ella, Aunt Anna, Uncle Mordred, Grandpa James, and Auntie Helen. My father is, well, it's complicated, and my mother is in a faraway place. William didn't know why he was telling Wendy these things. It was as if he was venting and letting the feelings that had been bottling inside his chest rise up to the surface. When I was a year old, my Grandpa James wrote a letter to his friend and decided to play matchmaker, William said in a helpless tone. Surprisingly, his friend agreed to his proposal and betrothed his granddaughter, who is a year older, to me. Wendy felt a sudden ache in her chest as her hands unconsciously clenched into fists. William didn't see this, because he didn't need to see it. The young lady sitting beside him was a straightforward person who wore her feelings on her face. William was a hopeless romantic in his past life. He didn't take any chances, and had the courage to pursue his love until it was too late. Because of this, he was sensitive to the feelings of others to a certain extent when it came to love. It was quite easy for him to notice that the young girl seemed to have developed a crush on him, but William was someone who had lived 2 lifetimes. He still hadn't gotten over his first love, Belle, and the feelings of guilt towards his master were preventing him from taking Wendy's feelings for him seriously. Chapter 163, William's Story Part 2. Time passed by, as I lived the life of a shepherd. Although I'm very fond of sheep, I prefer the company of goats, William continued his tale. Of course, this is due to the fact that I was raised by one, so I'm more biased towards goats compared to the other animals that we cared for. Then it happened. When I was 10 years old, my fiancée, along with her mother, and master visited Lant to see me. My fiancée is very cute. She was like a little fairy who had come out of a picture book in order to spread happiness to the world. Sadly, her visit was not a joyous one. William snorted as he picked up a pebble beside him and threw it at the lake. The surface of the lake rippled as the pebble sank to its bottom. Soon, the lake became still again as if nothing had happened. Seeing that William was lost in his thoughts, Wendy decided to wait for him to continue his tale. She wanted to know more about William's fiancée. She wanted to know who she was. She wanted to know it so badly. Only 2 minutes passed, but for Wendy, it felt like eternity. William ended his silence with a sigh and continued his tale. The reason for their visit was to see me and also to break the engagement, William said casually. Personally, I didn't really care about the marriage agreement because I know that these kinds of agreements usually have a bad ending. In fact, I was ready to cancel it anytime if my partner wished to do so. However, my fiancé's mother couldn't wait to do it and decided to take matters into her own hands. And that was the day when my fiancée, the so-called genius, who is only seen every 200 years, appeared in my life. Her name is Rebecca Fay Griffith, the only daughter of the current Duke of Griffith. Rebecca, Wendy gasped. Your fiancée is Rebecca. Do you know her? William asked. She's a good friend of mine, Wendy answered with a downcast expression. Our lands border each other's and our families have a very good relationship. Wendy felt depressed. Rebecca was her good friend, and the two treated each other like sisters. Knowing that William was her friend's fiancé, Wendy felt that her world had lost all its colors. If William had been engaged to a different girl, then Wendy wouldn't think much about it. However, Rebecca was different. Wendy had looked up to her because Rebecca was beautiful and talented. If the two of them were to stand side by side, Rebecca would be like the sun, and Wendy would only be the moon in the background, forever overshadowed by her friend's radiance and not being able to contest Rebecca's might. As Wendy was feeling helpless, William continued his tale whether she was listening or not. New STRIs at n/vel/b/i/n. Co. Our meeting should have been a happy one, but like I said, it wasn't a joyous occasion, William stated. The reason for their visit was to cancel the marriage agreement. Huh. Wendy raised her head and looked at William in disbelief. They wanted to cancel the agreement. Yes. William nodded his head. Apparently, Rebecca's mother, Lady Agatha, and her master, an elder of the Misty sect, Lady Eleanor, didn't want Rebecca to marry a poor and dirty shepherd. William closed his eyes as he remembered the scene that happened many years ago. In the end, I decided to agree to the cancellation of the marriage. Like I said, I'm not really fond of arranged marriages and my fiancé seemed to not have any interest in me as well. I even think that it was for the best that both of us parted ways. Although, now, she is only my fiancé in name, I don't want her to suffer her whole life just because of a forced marriage. William then gazed at Wendy with an arrogant look. Tell me, do I look like someone who will find it hard to find a wife? Wendy shook her head. Someone as amazing as Sir William will definitely not have any problem finding a wife. I even think that it would not be impossible for Sir William to have many wives. William smiled and nodded his head. This is the truth. Someone as handsome and awesome as me will not find it hard to find a wife. Since that is the case, why should I allow myself to be bound by an arranged marriage? Also, I am too good and too handsome to become Rebecca's husband. If I marry her, the one losing out would be me. William said it in a very dignified manner that Wendy found it very funny. She wasn't able to stop herself from giggling when she saw William's dignified expression. And so our marriage agreement came to an end, or so I thought. It didn't end there. Well, it's a bit complicated, William frowned as he explained. After the nobles, and the army, repelled the monster tide that ravaged the western part of the kingdom, Rebecca's grandfather, Lawrence Fox Griffith, visited Lant dragging his granddaughter, Lady Agatha, Lady Eleanor, and a group of disciples from the Misty sect along. His aim was to fix the misunderstanding that had happened and to convince Rebecca and I to push through with the marriage agreement. Oh, no. Wendy voiced her thoughts out loud. When she realized what she did, she hurriedly covered her mouth with both hands. William chuckled when he saw the pretty girl act this way and found it very cute. Right, it was an oh, no, moment. Wendy pouted and pounded William's chest to hide her embarrassment. William only smiled as he caught her hands and shook his head with a smile. He then resumed his tale while feeling lighthearted. Although I can't say it for certain, during that time, Rebecca and I unanimously agreed to end the marriage agreement that was made when we were still practically babies. For the two of us, it was an unfair deal. However, we still needed to give both of our grandparents some face, so we decided to be more civil during the meeting. In the end, the old fox, Sir Lawrence decided to compromise and gave us a condition. He said that Rebecca and I were going to have a duel in 7 years, and the winner can demand anything from the loser. The battle will take place at the peak of the Misty sect. William shook his head helplessly. Perhaps, the old fox didn't want Rebecca to be used as a political tool by her parents while she was still young, so he decided to use me and the duel to give her time to become strong enough to make her own decisions. I, on the other hand, wanted to give my gramps some face, since he was the one who made the proposal to make Rebecca my fiancée. If I remember correctly, the Misty sect here in the Hellan Kingdom is only a branch sect. The main sect is located in the central continent. That means that in 3 more years, I will need to fight Rebecca on her home turf. Wendy felt conflicted as she looked at William's expression. Will you go? I need to go. I must personally end the thing that my grandfather started. You said that the winner can order the loser to do anything, right? Wendy inquired. If you win, what kind of order will you give to Rebecca? I haven't really thought that far, William admitted. Because there are still 3 years before our fateful battle, I'll just cross that bridge once I get there. Do you plan to make her your wife? No, William answered firmly and resolutely. What's the point in making her my wife if she is unwilling? Also, I don't want to force anyone to become my wife. This goes against my principles. A carefree smile appeared on the shepherd's face which proved that he wasn't lying. Does this mean I still have a chance? Wendy asked. William's smile stiffened. He didn't know that Wendy was this determined to pursue him. This was the first time that someone confessed to him in both his lifetimes and it made him feel complicated. On one hand, Wendy was a very pretty girl. Although she wasn't as beautiful as Rebecca, she wasn't that far off. Also, her personality was something that William couldn't hate. Straightforward and true to her feelings. William could feel the girl's determination as she gazed straight into his eyes. How about we start as friends first? William felt that he wasn't really ready to accept her feelings. He didn't want to be irresponsible and say yes when he still had lingering attachments to Belle. William felt that it would be unfair to Wendy if he went about their relationship half-heartedly. I'm sorry, William said inside his heart. I don't want to hurt you due to my indecisiveness. He hoped that Wendy would give up on him, but he really had underestimated the girl's resolve. Wendy smiled and nodded her head. I think that starting as friends is good, too. Will, William said as he stretched out his hand for a handshake. Just call me Will. If you want me to be your friend, stop calling me Sir William. Or, do you really not want me to be your friend? Please stop teasing me, sir. Will. That's better. Ironically, both of them giggled at the same time. They felt that what they were doing was quite childish and yet, both of them felt relief. It was as if a stone had dropped down from their hearts and they could finally breathe normally again. William was about to say something. However, he heard the familiar sound of the system's notification. Immediately he checked his status page and almost spat blood when he read the contents of the message. Ding! Congratulations! You have acquired a special title. Title name, Friendzoned. Friendzoned. I came, I saw, got friendzoned. Increase vitality +5. Increase the attack power of your friends by 20%. When you equip this title, all the ladies within 100 meters of you will treat you as a friend. This title has no effect on men. Chapter 164. Can't friends hold hands? William cursed internally and hurriedly called out the system for an explanation. System? What is the meaning of this? Host, I don't understand your question. Can you please clarify? I'm talking about this new title I acquired. William's face darkened as he talked to the system. What's the meaning of this friendzoned? Host, do you not understand something as simple as this? You just got friendzoned. At $hashtag hashtag and caret hashtag asterisk and. William cursed at the system. Excuse me, I didn't get friendzoned. I was the one confessed to and the one who told her to become friends. Are you blind? Then host, tell me, what is your relationship with Wendy right now? We're friends. See, you just got friendzoned. What kind of logic is this? William roared. Hello, I demand a title revision. Change the title. At least change it to something more fitting. Sorry, I am unable to process the host's request. It is not within my authority to bypass the awarding of special titles. Then who should I talk to? I can't accept this. Just give it up, host. A special title is not easy to acquire. You should be happy to acquire such a rare and powerful title. If you equip this title, the power of friendship will multiply. FCKU and the power of friendship. William's body was shaking out of anger and shame. Wendy thought that she had said something wrong because William was acting strangely. She then became teary-eyed thinking that it was her fault. Host? Hold your temper? You are scaring the young lady? I'll deal with you later. You'd better wash your neck. William took a few deep breaths in order to calm himself. When he regained his calm, he looked at Wendy apologetically. I'm sorry, I have an ailment that appears from time to time, William explained as he coaxed the teary-eyed girl. It's not your fault. It is something that has followed me since I was born. A congenital illness. Yes, something like that. I'm sorry, did I scare you? A little bit. Wendy wasn't the type to lie, so she said her feelings up front. Then how about I make it up to you? William smiled. You can order me to do one thing. However, this order mustn't harm anyone physically, emotionally, and spiritually. As long as it is within my ability, I will do it. Really? I can give you any order. Yes, as long as you don't command me to hurt other people, and it is within my ability, I will do it. Okay, Wendy smiled. Tomorrow, let's have lunch together. Deal. William nodded his head. Then, I'll wait for you at the gates of the Magic Division class. Don't worry, I'll be there. Can I also bring Mama Ella with me? Of course, Wendy agreed. The two left the secret place holding hand in hand because Wendy didn't want to let go of William's hand. As the two walked towards the gate of the Magic Division, 3 figures appeared to block their way. It seems that Head Prefect William likes to sneak around the Magic Division, Est said with a smile. However, his eyes were locked on Wendy's hand that was holding on to William's. Seeing Est's gaze, Wendy immediately let go of William's hand in embarrassment. A blush appeared on her face as she hid behind William like a child that had done something wrong. HOH, what's this? Ian asked. Is Head Prefect William planning to poach the talents of our Magic Division? You sure have guts. William lightly coughed as he looked at Est and Ian, who seemed like they wanted to eat him alive. About this, I can explain, William replied. I was randomly walking without a destination in mind and suddenly found myself inside the Magic Division. Wendy saw me and she decided to take me for a stroll inside the Magic Division. I see, a stroll. Est nodded his head. Then where did the two of you go? I was immediately notified when you came to the Magic Division, but when I came to find you, you were nowhere to be found. Ian wasn't willing to let the matter drop either, so he fanned the flames while sneering at William. We asked around, but none of the students had seen you and Wendy. Where did the two of you go? Are you perhaps doing something inappropriate inside our Magic Division? William frowned. He could tell that Est and Ian were upset, and he assumed that it was due to the fact that they didn't find him when they came out to look for him. The red-headed boy knew that he couldn't tell them about Wendy's secret place, so he decided to speak half-truths. Wendy and I went to the garden to talk, William explained. I told her about Lant and the things that happened during my childhood. Is that so? Est narrowed his eyes. Then why were the two of you holding hands? Can't friends hold hands? William chuckled as he moved forward and held Est's hand. See, if you want, I can hold your hand anytime you want. Est looked at the boy's hand, holding his own, and his anger subsided a bit. Even so, he felt that something wasn't right, so he didn't let him go completely. He gave an eye signal to Ian and the latter nodded his head in understanding. Wendy, as officers of the Magic Division, it is our duty to ensure the safety of our members, Ian stated. Although Head Prefect William is our friend, he is still from the Martial Class Division. Can you tell us what the two of you talked about? Did he perhaps inquire about the secrets of our Magic Division class? No, Will didn't ask me anything related to the Magic Division class, Wendy answered. It was me who asked him questions and not the other way around. Will. Ian gave William a sidelong glance. Since when did the two of you get close? Ian wasn't stupid. He clearly remembered that Wendy referred to William as Head Prefect William or Sir William. The sudden intimacy between the two alarmed him. Find new stories on nov/el/bin.com. Est also frowned when he heard Wendy's words. He looked at William as if he was looking at his husband whom he personally caught cheating on him. William sighed as he scratched his head. What's wrong with that? Didn't I also ask you guys to call me Will? Even though I already told you to call me by that name, you still call me William. This makes me very sad. William was getting confused because Est and Ian were really acting quite strangely. He didn't want to make things difficult for Wendy, so he decided to leave before things escalated any further. I'll be going now, William announced. Wendy, I'm looking forward to having lunch with you tomorrow. See you tomorrow, Will. Wendy waved her hand. See you tomorrow. William waved back and left the magic division in haste. He felt that if he stayed a minute longer, something terrible would happen. After William disappeared from their sights, Est and Ian decided to have a friendly talk with Wendy and make her spill the beans. Where did you go? Kenneth asked the moment William entered their dormitory room. He then sniffed the air and gave William a weird look. Did you meet up with a girl? Yes, William replied as he sat down on his bed and hugged his mama Ella. I somehow ended up in the magic division and met Wendy. I see. Kenneth didn't inquire any further and lay on the bed to sleep. Good night. Good night. William kissed the side of Ella's face before laying down on the bed. The Angarian goat also laid down beside William and closed her eyes to sleep. She didn't need to question her baby where he went or who he met. For her it wasn't important. What was important was that William was safe and he was by her side. It didn't take long for William to fall asleep. His heart-to-heart talk with Wendy had helped him get over the haze that had clouded his mind. Although he was still feeling guilty in regards to his master, Celine, this was a matter that he couldn't do anything about at this point in time. William had vowed to have a heart-to-heart talk with Celine and apologize for the ill feelings that he had kept inside his heart during the first weeks of his training. He was not a saint. He felt betrayed when Celine forced him to become her slave without his consent. Even though it worked out in the end, the lingering negative feelings had buried themselves deep within his heart. Although William had buried these feelings until the time came that he could pay her back, these feelings had resurfaced to connect to the new feelings he felt when he heard Celine's tale from Simon. He knew that he and Celine needed to sit down and have a talk. As master and disciple, some things must be made clear with each other. William firmly believed this and he hoped that he, and his master, Celine, would be able to form a true master and disciple relationship that would stand the test of time. Chapter 165, State of Emergency. That night, in different places in the Hellan Kingdom, several groups of men infiltrated many low to high-grade dungeons. They purposefully chose the dungeons that were close to villages and towns. No one knew their motive, nor what organization they belonged to. They used the darkness to hide their tracks and slipped away under the light of starlight. When William arrived at the meeting place with his mama Ella, he was surprised to find Est, Ian, and Isaac waiting for him along with Wendy. The red-headed boy didn't think much about it because all that were present were his friends, except the snot-nosed pansy Ian. Well then, shall we go? Wendy smiled and grabbed hold of William's hand. She then led the way to the picnic area with a smile on her face. Est and Ian frowned, but they didn't say anything and followed behind the pair who were chatting happily in front of them. When they arrived at the location, Wendy summoned a blanket and laid it on the ground. The spot she had chosen was a clearing beside a river where one could admire the natural beauty around them. William sighed and thought that the magic division had so many good things, compared to his own martial division. Isaac set down the basket he was carrying and took out the sandwiches that he had prepared for their lunch picnic. Wendy had also been holding a basket and inside it was roasted chicken, sandwiches, fruits, salads, and ham, that she had taken from the dining kitchen. It was a pretty unusual combination of foods, but William wasn't a picky eater. He happily ate a little bit of everything, even the roasted chicken and ham. After the meal, Est decided to ask William if he had any plans for the rest of the week. My plans. William crossed his arms over his chest as he pondered for a while. I don't have any particular plans this week, aside from training the first years. Why? Do you need me to accompany you somewhere? Actually, I planned to ask you about our next dungeon expedition, Est said with a serious expression. Since the Goblin Crypt is currently under investigation, it would be best to find a different dungeon to go to. Do you have any recommendations? No, I'll leave the decision in your hands. Are you sure? Yes. William nodded his head. The only reason why he chose the Goblin Crypt was to investigate the differences between his version and the real one. Although he wasn't able to make a full comparison, the circumstances couldn't be helped. Okay, I'll pick a good dungeon to resume. Est wasn't able to finish his sentence because the emblem on his uniform started to send out an alarm. The emblem pinned on William's uniform did the same and the two head prefects exchanged a glance with a serious expression. Let's put off our talk for now, William said as he stood up. The dean of the academy is calling for us. Est and I have to go. Ian, Isaac, help Wendy tidy up this place and wait for me in our dormitory room, Est ordered. Will, let's go. William nodded his head and sprinted with Est towards the academy's conference room. This was the place where matters of great importance were discussed by the dean and the student body of the academy. When Est and William arrived at their destination, the other head prefects along with their vice prefects were already waiting outside the conference room. Priscilla had arrived earlier and was only waiting for William to appear. She immediately walked towards William and stood behind him, as per her rank as vice prefect. Naturally, the vice prefect of the first-year magic division, Edward, who lost to Priscilla in their duel, was also there and stood behind Est. When the last officers of each grade arrived, the door to the conference room finally opened. Inside, the dean and the instructors of the academy were all seated in their designated places. Simon had a serious expression on his face, which meant that something big had happened. The dean asked the students to take their seats in order to start the meeting. "Thank you everyone for coming on such short notice," Simon said. "What I am about to tell you is of grave importance, and the sooner the student body mobilizes, the sooner we can assist the kingdom in facing a threat that has caught us unprepared." Simon waved his hand and a projection of the territory of the Hellan kingdom floated in the center of the conference room. There were red dots blinking on the map and there were more than 20 of them. William came from the countryside, so he wasn't familiar with the places where the red dots were blinking. However, those who did recognize them kept their mouths shut and waited for Simon to continue his explanation. For some unknown reason, all of these dungeons have shown signs of being corrupted. Miasma is leaking out of their entrances, which means that a drastic change is happening inside the dungeons. According to the kingdom's investigators, and our own investigators, the level of miasma that is being released from the dungeon is a sign that a dungeon outbreak is about to happen. A dungeon outbreak? System, do you know what a dungeon outbreak is? William inquired. To answer the host's question, a dungeon outbreak is when a dungeon reaches a point where it spawns monsters at an alarming rate. This makes it impossible for the dungeon to shelter these monsters and forces them to go outside of the dungeon in order to find other places to live. So, it is similar to a beast tide. In essence, yes. However, there is a big difference between the two. Once a dungeon outbreak occurs, the dungeon won't stop reproducing monsters until the dungeon cores are destroyed. Unlike a beast tide, where the number of monsters is finite, the monsters that the dungeon outbreak spawns are infinite. If left unchecked, an army of more than 1 million can easily be produced in less than 2 weeks. After William understood the severity of the dungeon outbreak, he focused his attention on listening to Simon's explanation. "Currently, the kingdom is still recovering from the effects of the beast tide," Simon said with a grim expression. "There is not enough manpower to handle the dungeons that are about to unleash a horde of dungeon monsters into the kingdom's populated areas. Because of this, the king has declared a state of emergency and ordered the various training institutions in the kingdom to send their students to help form a defensive line to help protect and evacuate the citizens. Also, if there is a chance, they can also help with subjugating the dungeon using force." Simon paused for a while before continuing his explanation. The king had already issued the kingdom's army to go to the various affected areas to perform the clearing and rescue operations. "We have been tasked to handle the 4 dungeons that are within the range of our teleport gates and keep the populace safe from harm. Naturally, all the dungeons have different threat levels, so we are going to assign each grade to protect a territory according to its rank." Simon pointed at the map and one of the places where a red dot was blinking zoomed in. "The first years will handle the Roaring Quarters, which is situated in Dawsbury. The second years will be going to the Tranquil Crypt that is found in West Wend," Simon stated. "The third years will go to the Forsaken Catacombs at Rotherham. As for the fourth years, they will go to the Lair of the Ancient Queen in Aberdeen. This is an emergency commission from the King of the Hellan Kingdom. All students that are currently inside the academy must participate. There are no exceptions. Don't worry. Your professors will also come with you to protect all of you to the best of their abilities." Simon scanned the room and looked at the faces of the children who were looking back at him with grim expressions. The dean of the academy sighed because he knew that this was the king's last resort in order to handle the latest threat that had fallen upon their kingdom. "No matter what happens, you must prioritize your safety," Simon said in a firm manner. "If the situation cannot be resolved, all of you must immediately make a tactical retreat. If possible, it is my hope that we will not suffer any casualties in this deployment, but our manpower is stretched thin. I can only ask all of you to do your best and return to the academy alive." Simon sat on his chair, feeling tired and exhausted, but he needed to issue his final orders in order to ensure that everyone understood the severity of the situation. "Instructors, make sure to stockpile potions, healing salves, and elixirs. The warehouse of the academy will be opened for all of you. I hope that you will do your duties and lead the children to the best of your abilities. You may all go and prepare the necessary items that you will be needing to complete your mission. Make sure that all of you return alive." "Yes, sir." William, along with Priscilla, immediately headed towards the Solaris dormitory to tell everyone about the emergency mission assigned to them. William had already faced 2 beast tides in his lifetime. Although he didn't have his powers right now, he was confident that he could retreat safely if need be. However, right now, he was the head prefect of the first-year martial class. He couldn't run away and leave the students behind. William understood that the possibility of dying on this mission was very high. Fortunately, before the meeting ended, Simon said that if there were students who didn't want to participate in the mission, they could just stay inside the academy for their own safety. William vowed that he would do his best to ensure that none of his wards died in this battle. He remembered when his herd of 50 goats faced off against hundreds of dire wolves. Out of the 50 goats that he had raised with love, only 13 remained. Although many years had passed since that incident, William could still remember that day very clearly. He didn't want the same thing to happen to the students under his command, and for that, he needed to make his own preparations. After he had relayed the news to the others, he left the students under Priscilla's care and disappeared from the Solaris dormitory. Visit novelbin.cm for updates. When he reappeared in the Martial Division, it was morning and everyone was already waiting for him to lead them into the teleport gates bound for the Roaring Quarters, situated in the town called Dawsbury. Chapter 166, Dungeon Outbreak Part 1. This is terrible, one of the first years muttered as they looked at the devastation around them. The walls of the small town were barely standing and many of the local people were badly injured. The members of the Spirit and Magic divisions, who excelled in healing magic, went to attend the injured people. Those who specialized in earth magic hurriedly repaired and reinforced the town walls. The captain of the guards that were guarding Dawsbury was currently talking to Grant, Layla, and a woman with reddish-brown hair, who seemed to be the head instructor of the first-year Spirit Division. According to the captain, they barely managed to repel the first wave of the dungeon outbreak. Only Class E and Class D monsters had emerged from the dungeon, but their numbers were staggering. A/N, a quick recap on the classes of the high-tier beasts. Centennial Beasts, Class S, Millennial Beasts, Class SS, Myriad Beasts, Class SSR, and the final class is Calamity Class Beasts. Calamities are just a step away or already in the stage of a demigod. Grant, Layla, and the woman with reddish-brown hair, Miranda, nodded their heads in understanding. This was a common phase during a dungeon outbreak and veterans already knew what to expect. Usually, during an outbreak, the people in the towns would immediately be evacuated while the kingdom's army would be dispatched to subjugate the dungeon and destroy its core. However, the Hellan kingdom was still recovering from the beast tide that happened 4 years ago. Many strong fighters had died to protect the kingdom and 4 years was not enough to fill their ranks again. Although many new recruits had joined the kingdom's army after the beast tide, they were still lacking in battle experience. These new recruits were the same people that were dispatched to protect the town of Dawsbury from the dungeon outbreak. I estimate that the next wave will happen in 4 hours, perhaps even sooner, the captain reported. How do we proceed from here? The captain had already been briefed that reinforcements from the Royal Academy would be sent to assist them. However, he was disappointed when he saw that the ones who came to support them were only first-year students and their instructors. The 3 heads of the different divisions could easily read the captain's thoughts through his body language. But, they pretended not to notice. This was not the time for internal conflict and the most important matter was to decide on their next course of action. We will resist the second wave while using the town's defenses, Grant stated. After that, the instructors will head inside the dungeon in order to destroy the dungeon core. How many floors does this dungeon have? 20 floors, the guard captain replied. Most of the monsters inside it are a combination of dog and flying type monsters. However, there is one big problem. The monsters we fought earlier have a bit of miasma inside them. I'm afraid that, in the next wave, the miasma inside their bodies will be more potent than the last wave. The expressions of the 3 instructors immediately became serious. Miasma was a poisonous mist that was usually found in the forbidden areas of the continent. According to the scholars, long exposure to miasma would create negative side effects in the body. Depending on its level of toxicity, miasma was known to corrupt the minds of people and bring out their powerful negative emotions. Once these emotions took hold of their body, they would enter a state similar to the berserk state where they wouldn't be able to differentiate between friend and foe. In this state, they would be more like feral beasts whose only purpose was to destroy until they breathed their last breath. Corruption from miasma could be treated in the early stages, however, if treatment was not administered in time, the will of the infected person or beast would corrode. This would continue until they lost their former selves and became mindless beasts. This is bad, the children may not be able to handle miasma poisoning, Layla frowned. What should we do? Spirit users are more resistant to miasma. However, long exposure to it will still corrode our minds, Miranda commented. Although I have students who can cure miasma poisoning, they won't be enough to tend to all the first years before they run out of spirit power. Grant crossed his arms over his chest as he pondered their next course of action. After an hour of brainstorming, a plan was finally formulated. All the children would stay inside the town and help resist the dungeon outbreak from the safety of its walls. The magicians, archers, and spirit users would use long-range attacks to whittle down their numbers. If any monsters managed to get past their bombardment, the martial classes would defend the walls and repel the advancing monsters. The magicians and spirit users would then play the role of support from behind. Those who were starting to feel faint from miasma poisoning would immediately be taken to the rear of the defenders where the healers would tend to the miasma that had invaded their bodies. All the students were briefed of the plan and immediately went to their designated positions. William, and the archers of the martial class, stood on the town's walls and looked in the direction where a black mist was rising up into the air. According to the captain, that was where the Roaring Quarters dungeon was located. Follow stories at n/v/e/lb.com. Est stood beside him along with the bulk of the Magic Division classes. A quarter of the Spirit Division was in the rear responsible for healing, and the rest were on top of the walls looking in the direction of the dungeon with bated breaths. The students numbered less than 1,000, and the professors that came along with them only numbered in the 30s. If you added the kingdom's army that had been dispatched to the scene, their combined forces amounted to less than 1,400 people. This is like the calm before the storm, Est said as he looked in the distance. You told me in the past that Lant had experienced 2 beast tides. You were also present in both of them. Based on what you have experienced, what are our chances against a beast tide with our current forces? The other students who heard Est's question were shocked when they heard that William participated in a battle against the beast tide. The majority of them didn't believe Est's claim and looked at William in disdain. The beast tide happened 4 years ago, and William was only 14 years old. That meant that during the monster tide, he was only 10 years old. How could a 10-year-old possibly participate in a battle of that magnitude? William wasn't aware of their malicious looks filled with disdain because he was busy reminiscing about the past. He didn't know how strong the instructors were, but he liked to believe that the majority of them were capable of facing off against Class B and Class A beasts on their own. Because if they were unable to do that, then their chances of surviving this battle were close to 0. This force may be enough to contend against a beast tide, William replied after careful consideration. This was on the condition that the students were only going to fight against the small fries, and let the instructors fight against the stronger opponents. If the instructors were not strong enough to turn the tide of battle, then the endgame would result in their complete annihilation. However, we are not facing a beast tide, but a dungeon outbreak. William made sure that he made this point across. This is my first time participating in this kind of battle, so I can't compare the magnitude of the enemy's forces with what I have experienced in the past. Also, we are dealing with monsters infected with miasma. This will definitely not be an easy battle. Est nodded his head in understanding. To be honest, Est felt safer when he was standing beside William than standing beside any of the instructors. For some reason, he thought that everything would be fine if William was around. This kind of mentality had been born inside the Trial of Courage, where he fought side by side with the red-headed boy and defeated an enemy whom he had deemed impossible to kill. Most of the students were feeling anxious, but he was not. Est glanced at the young boy who had created a miracle for him, and prayed that he would be safe in the battle against the upcoming dungeon outbreak. Me. Ella bleated as her ears perked up. Everyone get ready, William said as he knocked an arrow to his bow. The monsters are on their way. Archers, load your arrows. Magicians, start chanting your spells. Est ordered. The archers under William followed their head prefect without a question, while the magicians reluctantly chanted their spells. The Spirit Division class didn't do anything because they couldn't see anything from their vantage point. The head prefect and vice prefect of the Spirit Division thought that William was only joking with them, so they decided to ignore his words and didn't instruct those under them to prepare their long-range spells. They were waiting for William to make a fool of himself and see the consequences of his stupidity. It was at that moment when they felt the ground tremble as if a minor earthquake was happening. From the mouth of the dungeon, a black tide burst forth en masse. Roars of beasts and the shrieks of flying beasts reverberated in the air as they charged towards the town of Dawsbury with the intention of trampling it to the ground. Start chanting your long-range spells, the head prefect of the Spirit Division class cried out in panic. Archers, take aim. Wbnovel ordered as he pulled the string of his bow to the fullest. He watched and waited until the monsters reached their strike range. The moment the first wave had passed the mark, William immediately ordered them to attack. Open fire. William roared as his arrow flew straight and true towards the head of a 2-meter-tall dog-type monster. The sound of the wind whistling echoed above the town's wall as hundreds of arrows rained on the monsters. Not long after, the long-range magic attacks of the magicians joined the downpour and decimated all the creatures in their path. This was how the battle began, and no one knew what the ending would be. Chapter 167, Dungeon Outbreak Part 2. When the archers were almost out of arrows, and the magicians were almost out of magic power, William and Est immediately ordered for the next teams to take their place. The archers who had run out of arrows immediately went to the rear to restock on ammunition, while the magicians retreated in order to drink potions to replenish their magic power. William and Est made several teams to alternate between attack and retreat because they knew that they couldn't afford to exhaust all their manpower through continuous fighting. The only problem was the Spirit Division. The head prefect and the vice prefect were inexperienced in large-scale battles and pooled all of their fighting power together. They didn't think about forming teams to alternate between attack and recovery because they thought that they could wipe out the enemies with their superior firepower. Although their initial offensive barrage was impressive in the first few minutes, they ran out of juice just past the 10-minute mark. This sudden lull in the attack created a gap for the monsters to break through the bombardment of ranged attacks from the defenders. Shift to close combat fighting. William ordered as he took away his bow and summoned his staff. The monsters had now reached the town walls and some of them had already started to scale it. The archers backed down and allowed the experts in close combat to defend the town walls together with William. However, they didn't run away completely. Earlier, the Earth Element magicians had created watchtowers at the back of the town walls that the archers could use in the case that the town walls had been breached. William had assigned Priscilla to take full command of the archers once they initiated Plan B. The red-headed boy knew that his vice prefect wouldn't let him down, so he focused his attention on defending the walls from being overrun by the dungeon monsters. EXP gained, 1. 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 A series of notifications flooded William's status screen as the battle raged on. The system had explained earlier the reason why he was getting very low experience points after killing a monster. It was all due to the miasma. In order to prevent the miasma from affecting William's body, the system decided to purify the experience points, which led to William being immune from the miasma even though he was killing the monsters at close quarters. Unfortunately, the same couldn't be said for the rest of the martial class. William had assigned the system to monitor the students within 200 meters of him. This was the maximum limit that the system could observe under such dire conditions. When signs of miasma poisoning were detected, William would immediately order that person to return to the rear to receive treatment from the clerics. The same could be said for the magicians. Since William was fighting side by side with Est, the red-headed boy would report to his friend the members of the magic division that were currently affected by miasma poisoning. The creatures that came out from the dungeon were a combination of Class E, D, and C monsters. William had used his appraisal skill earlier and identified the enemies that they were facing. Morn Teeth. Corrupted dungeon creature. Threat level, E. Cannot be added to the herd. A black dog that has been thoroughly corrupted by miasma and only seeks to end the life of others. Ash Teeth. Corrupted dungeon creature. Threat level, D. Cannot be added to the herd. This grey dog is the next form of Morn Teeth. It is very agile and capable of jumping as high as 6 meters in the air. Its fangs contain a paralyzing poison that would render its victim helpless once bitten. Jagged Hunter. Corrupted flying dungeon creature. Threat level, D. Cannot be added to the herd. A bird of prey that has a wingspan of 1.5 meters, 4.9 feet, and is capable of performing complex aerial maneuvers when hunting for food. Its sharp talons and beak are its most deadly weapons. Spite Seeker. Corrupted flying dungeon creature. Threat level, C. Cannot be added to the herd. A bird of prey that is capable of using wind magic to decimate its enemy from high above the ground. It has a wingspan of 3 meters, 9.8 feet, that is able to create gusts of wind to blow away the enemies that block its way. The instructors of the magic and spirit divisions were busy fighting against the flying creatures that were trying to scatter their formation from above. There were over 24 spite seekers that were circling above the skies of Dawsbury, and the instructors were making sure that none of their attacks landed on the children. The martial class instructors, on the other hand, were helping the students on the wall resist the monsters who were trying to climb up the walls in order to overwhelm the defenders. With every minute that passed, more and more students were forced to leave the walls in order to be treated from miasma poisoning. The clerics on the rear were working non-stop to remove the effect of the miasma that had seeped inside the bodies of the defenders. Those who had finished their treatment would immediately rejoin their comrades in order to resist the dungeon outbreak. Gaya, a martial student, cried out in pain as an ash teeth bit his arm and injected a paralyzing poison in his body. It was about to finish off the boy when an Angarian goat charged in and sent it flying off the walls with blood gushing out of its sides. Ella roared a warcry as it charged at 3 Mornteeth who had successfully jumped over the wall while using their comrades' bodies as leverage. 3 howls of pain followed as these 3 beasts were killed by Ella, one after another. William had ordered her to assist the students on the wall and help them if needed be. Although she was reluctant to leave her baby's side, she still followed his orders. The red-headed boy swung his wooden staff and smashed the heads of the 2 Mornteeth in front of him in rapid succession. William then stepped aside, to allow Est's sword to pierce through the skull of the monster that tried to attack him from the side. The 2 boys once again stood back to back as they defended their position on the wall, killing the beasts that had managed to bypass the defenses. Est, go back, William said in a serious tone. You have been soaking in miasma since the walls were breached. Go get treated, now. Est slashed at another Mornteeth before giving his reply. If I leave, you will not be able to hold this position for long. Don't worry, I can manage until you return. William swung his staff at an Ashteeth, sending it flying outside the town wall. Go hurry? The more time you waste, the more dangerous your situation will be. Est gritted his teeth, but he still nodded his head in acknowledgement. He was starting to feel lightheaded, and he knew that it was a sign that his body was nearing its limit in resisting the miasma inside his body. Don't die until I return. Est shouted as he ran towards the rear of the town where the clerics and the injured students were located. I'm too young and too handsome to die, William replied without turning his head. I'll be here when you return. Hearing William's narcissistic reply, Est felt more assured in leaving him alone to defend their position. When Est arrived at the makeshift infirmary, most of the clerics and spirit healers had pale faces. Most of them had reached their limits as they squeezed out every bit of their magic to tend to everyone's injuries. Follow the latest novels n/felbin.com. Some of the students received serious injuries because the flying birds of prey that flew above the town had sneak attacked them from the sky. Fortunately, they were yet to have any casualties on their side, which made Est feel a little better about their condition. He patiently waited to be treated while worrying about William, who was defending their position on his own. Will, please, stay strong, Est prayed inside his heart. I'll return as soon as I can. William gritted his teeth as he swung his wooden staff left and right. He didn't know how long he had been fighting, but his arms were already starting to get sore. As he gazed at the sea of monsters outside the town walls who seemed to have no end in sight, he finally realized how deadly a dungeon outbreak could be. Chapter 168, Don't worry. I'll keep your little prince safe. A beautiful lady with purple hair sipped her coffee as she lazily gazed outside her window. Her gold-rimmed glasses were there to prevent others from getting charmed by her light purple eyes, that would send any man to his knees to grovel at her feet. Mistress, the organization had made their move, Oliver reported. Is that so? Celine's beautiful eyes looked at the scenery outside her window as if she didn't care for anything in the world. I wonder, our little will be dragged into this mess? According to the report I gathered, the Royal Academy was forced to send its students to help defend the towns near its territory, Oliver reported. Ezio has also sent a notice that William was sent to take part in the defense of the town of Dawsbury. Celine hummed as she placed her coffee cup on top of the table. She then went to the couch and laid down in a lazy manner. Oliver, what do you think of my disciple? William? I think he's too narcissistic for his age. Celine giggled when she heard the parrot monkey's reply. She then closed her eyes and the image of the handsome half-elf boy appeared inside her head. The beautiful sorceress had taken William as her disciple because of a bet. At first, she wasn't planning to teach him seriously, but she changed her mind after the battle with the golden-scaled crocodile. She intended to torture William to vent out her frustration for losing her rare ingredients, but the boy was more resilient than she imagined. Although the torture he received for the past 4 years was nothing compared to the suffering she had endured during her own training, she had grown fond of the boy. She really treated him as a slave. William cooked for her, cleaned the house for her, did the laundry for her, and catered to her every whim and need. Celine knew well that, in the deepest part of William's heart, he resented her. How could she not understand his feelings? She had suffered the same fate when she was younger. Forced to wear the collar of enslavement, and forced to experience unimaginable pain and suffering, it was impossible not to feel resentful. Even now, Celine still resented the people who had tossed her aside as if she was a dirty thing that they didn't even want to touch, nor see in their presence. Someday, I will return. When that day comes, all of you will kneel and beg for my forgiveness. Due to her strong desire to enact her revenge, Celine endured. She endured for years, until she met an organization that wanted to bring the world to ruin. At that time, the beautiful sorceress wanted the whole world to burn, so she secretly joined their ranks and even helped them out in achieving their goal. The ingredients she received were the payment for her services. Even now, she was still in contact with the organization. The members of the organization had made a binding oath that gave its members freedom to do what they wanted. They were free to share information, exchange resources, and collaborate with each other. However, the organization couldn't force their members to participate in something that they didn't want to do. This may sound absurd for an organization whose goal was to bring the world to ruin, but they really didn't care whether a member participated in their activities or not. In exchange for this freedom, the organization only asked for its members not to betray it. They were also not allowed to interfere with each other, nor attack each other. This non-aggression treaty was included in the oath that they had taken when they joined the organization. It's really ironic. Celine sighed as she looked up at the ceiling. The potions I made to propagate miasma are now being used to bring this kingdom to its knees. I wonder, if William knew this, would he feel disgusted with me? Would he be disappointed? What do you think, Oliver? Knowing William, he will definitely demand an explanation, Oliver replied. In addition, knowing how thick-skinned and shameless he is, he will also demand compensation. Celine chuckled because she could already imagine William's coy expression, as he tried to convince her to give him hush money to hide this secret. Such a silly boy, Celine muttered. Well, I guess it is only fitting for a silly woman to have a silly disciple. Master, should I go there to help William? Oliver inquired. Although he acted calm on the surface, he was very worried about the boy. He was there when Celine created the potion that propagated miasma. The parrot monkey knew how sinister it was. However, what he didn't anticipate was that the organization would be bold enough to use it to corrupt dungeon cores to trigger dungeon outbreaks. Even Celine didn't expect that her potion would be used in such a manner. However, what was done was done. She had already received the payment for her potions, and the organization had paid her handsomely for her services. Frankly, Celine really didn't care if the Hellan kingdom really fell to ruin. She had no attachment to the kingdom. However, she cared about the people of Lant. Perhaps, due to this, the organization didn't choose to corrupt a dungeon near her territory. Celine may not care for the kingdom, but she did care for William. After all, the handsome half-elf was her only disciple. Because of this, Celine felt conflicted. Oliver waited patiently for his mistress to give an order, but Celine kept her silence. 10 minutes later, a sigh escaped her beautiful lips as she turned her head to look at the loyal retainer who had stayed with her all these years. Oliver, flowers grown inside a greenhouse couldn't compare to those that were born in the wild, Celine said. I believe in William. He will survive this because he is strong. Although her words were firm, it was as if she was trying to convince herself that William would be fine even if she didn't send Oliver to help him. Oliver sighed internally, but he didn't say anything else. He only prayed in his heart that the gods would keep William safe. While the parrot monkey was deep in his thoughts, Celine stood up from the couch and opened the window. She then turned towards Oliver with a smile on her face. Oliver, you have been cooped up inside the house for a long time, Celine said with a sweet smile. That's no good. You should exercise your body from time to time. I order you to go sightseeing for a few days. Just make sure to return as soon as possible. Celine then started to walk towards the stairs. Before I forget, make sure to bring back some souvenirs. As you command, my lady. Oliver bowed and flapped his wings. He flew out of the window and soared towards the sky. His destination, a certain place where a certain narcissistic half-elf had been deployed. A smirk appeared on Oliver's monkey face as he increased his speed. Mistress, you look really cute when you act like a cutie, Oliver mused as he turned his head to look at the town of Lant that was gradually getting farther away. Don't worry. I'll keep your little prince safe. After all, I still need to ensure that he will pick you as his bride when he grows up. I won't hand him over to Celeste. Follow the latest novels n/felbin.com. A/n, cutie are those who are often cold, blunt, and cynical. They may seem very emotionless and stoic on the outside, but on the inside they're very caring, at least when it comes to the ones they love. Thank you, Google Senpai. With another flap of his wings, a sonic boom echoed in the air. Oliver's speed drastically increased as he traveled at the speed of sound. Half an hour later, the town of Dawsbury finally appeared on the horizon. Oliver arrived just in time to see the little half-elf get struck by a lightning bolt that sent him flying a few meters away from where he stood. Chapter 169, Creatures of Myths and Legends Part 1. Half an hour before Oliver arrived in the skies of Dawsbury. This is hopeless, William thought as he forced himself to swing the wooden staff in his hands to end the life of the monster in front of him. As the battle progressed, William felt that the staff in his hands were getting heavier. It was mostly due to his arms aching and reaching their limit. It was at that time when he barely avoided a sneak attack by one of the Class C beasts, Spite Seeker, from the sky. This lapse in his concentration allowed the dog-like creature in front of him to use that opportunity to tackle him and pin him down to the ground. Sharp fangs bared themselves as the ash teeth tried to bite William's neck. However, the shepherd was able to use his staff to block the dog's teeth and prevented himself from getting bitten. A battle of strength ensued as the ash teeth forced its jaw closer to William's face. The stench of rotting flesh assailed William's nose as he gritted his teeth to resist the wolf's assault. Will! A familiar voice shouted, and not long after, a steel spike embedded itself in the ash teeth's forehead. William forcefully kicked the dead monster to the side as he propped himself to stand. A young lady with blonde hair and blue eyes ran in his direction and supported his body. Are you all right? Wendy asked. Her voice was laced with concern. I'm fine, William replied. But, why are you here? What happened to the spot you were defending? DI's cover new tories at nve/lbin.c/o. Wendy shook her head as he dragged William away from the town's wall. The walls have been breached. It is no longer safe to defend it. As if waiting for that cue, a bugle horn sounded across the town which signaled the order to retreat to the second line of defense. The second line of defense was where the watchtowers were located. The majority of mages, who didn't specialize in close combat, had already retreated to the watchtowers and were firing spells to help the defenders on the town's wall to evacuate. William was still holding the staff in his hand, but he didn't have the strength to lift it. After the adrenaline had passed, he was left exhausted. Wendy took William's arm and placed it over her shoulder to better support his body while they made their escape. Several of the monsters ran after them, but they were shot down by Andy, who was standing on the roof of a house and paying close attention to the evacuating students. The martial class instructors held the front, which gave the students sufficient time to retreat. Those who had lost their strength were carried away by their comrades as they ran for their lives. Andy sighed in relief when he saw that William was safe and sound. He shot arrows one after the other. He needed to buy as much time as possible for his students to reach safety. When William and Wendy arrived at the second line of defense, a worried Ella immediately appeared by his side. The Angarian goat had been carrying the wounded students from the walls to the infirmary during the battle and had lost sight of how William was doing. Seeing that William was safe, the Angarian goat went back to his side in order to protect him from further harm. Thank you, William said as Wendy supported him to sit on the ground. You're welcome, Will, Wendy replied and sat down beside him. William sighed internally because his body was as heavy as lead. Since the battle started, he hadn't left the town wall and continued to defend his position for more than an hour. The loss of defenders due to miasma poisoning had placed him under great pressure. This in turn forced him to surpass his limits in fending off dozens of monsters at the same time. The red-headed boy was feeling drowsy as exhaustion washed over his body. He tried to fight it off, but his body was not cooperating with him. He nodded off several times, until he finally closed his eyes to sleep. When he was about to let himself be taken by sleep's embrace, something sweet and cold assaulted his tongue. He forcefully opened his eyes and saw Wendy gently feeding him a rejuvenation potion. He opened his mouth wider to allow more of the rich liquid in to help him recover. When the potion was all used up, William felt a quarter of his strength return to his body. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep him awake and function at this crucial time. Thank you, William said with a smile. Rejuvenation potions are expensive. How about I repay you by cooking for you for a week? My master said that I'm a very good cook. Really? Wendy asked with a hint of amusement. Just don't blame me if you get addicted to my cooking. My standards, when it comes to food, are really high. Let's see if Sir William can back his words with his cooking. The two stared at each other before chuckling at the same time. Both of them were trying to ease each other's tension. They knew that they didn't have long to rest before another round of battle would commence once the town wall had been breached completely. William was about to say something when a powerful explosion reverberated from the town's wall. The two children glanced at each other before hurrying to climb one of the watchtowers to see what was going on. What is that? A mage shakily pointed at the center of the monster formation. A giant black dog that was at least 6 meters tall, stared at them with glowing blue eyes. There were blue streaks of fur on its body that resembled lightning bolts as tendrils of electricity snaked around its body. In the air, a deafening cry was heard as a giant, black-winged serpent made its presence known. Its body was made up of dark scales and its glowing blue eyes eerily gazed at the people who were defending Dawsbury as if to mock their futile attempts to stop the inevitable. The wind started to pick up and dark clouds covered the horizon. A peal of thunder resounded in the heavens as flashes of lightning illuminated the black clouds that blocked the light of the sun. Soon the entire town of Dawsbury was enshrouded in darkness, and yet, the countless glowing eyes from the dungeon monsters, who were almost upon them, didn't fade in the slightest. William gulped as he used his appraisal skill to identify the two giant beasts that seemed to be the masterminds that commanded the monster horde. Just a glance was enough to tell him that both of them were pretty bad news. Colittle. Underworld dog. Corrupted guardian. Threat level, S, low. Centennial beast. Cannot be added to the herd. This mythical beast was said to wield the power of lightning, fire, and death. A cursed creature that was so diabolical that not many dared to fight against it. According to legend, Colittle guarded the sun as it set into the underworld every night. Ironically, this creature is hailed both as a destroyer and a savior at the same time. He who fights this myth should be weary, for it places a curse on anyone that defies it. Quetzalcoatl. Winged serpent. Corrupted guardian. Threat level, S, low. Centennial beast. Cannot be added to the herd. This mythical beast wields the power of wind and rain. Sometimes hailed as the Lord of the Dawn, this creature can create powerful storms, hurricanes, and tornadoes that can destroy anything in their path. According to legend, this creature witnessed the creation of the world and even helped mankind during its time of need. William gritted his teeth as he stared at the two mythical beasts in front of him. He was about to shout and warn the instructors that they had to retreat at all costs when Colittle roared and shot a lightning bolt, that was as big as a bus, towards William, Ella, and Wendy who were standing at the center of the defensive formation. The red-headed boy immediately pushed Ella, and Wendy, out of the way as the lightning bolt engulfed him and dyed his vision white. Chapter 170, Creatures of Myths and Legends Part 2. It hurts, please, help us. We can't hold out for much longer, please, save us. 7 See it Enfeld/N. C/M for L test bells. Two pleading voices echoed inside William's mind as the lightning bolt engulfed his entire body. His student uniform was made from a special material that could withstand magic attacks up to the first circle. However, against an attack from a centennial, it offered no form of resistance whatsoever and immediately turned to ashes. Time seemed to slow down as William entered a trance-like state. In that white world, William saw two orbs of light. One was yellow, the other red. The lights of these two orbs gradually dimmed as they pleaded for William to help them. When the world regained its color, the red-headed boy laid on the ground unmoving. His wooden staff lay on the ground a few meters away from him as tendrils of electricity snaked around his body. If not for the pants that his Auntie Helen made specially, that he wore under his uniform, he would have been completely naked the moment his student robe was destroyed. Me. Ella bleated as he hurried by William's side. She nudged the side of his face in an attempt to wake him up. While Ella was trying to awaken the fallen half-elf, the lightning currents that snaked around William's body gathered towards the black rose tattoo on William's chest and were absorbed completely. Will. Wendy shouted as she ran to his side. She then checked William's body for any injuries and was surprised that his body was still intact with only minor bruises. William raised his hand and caressed Ella's neck to assure her that he was fine. He then slowly opened his eyes to look at the side where Wendy was looking down on him with a worried expression. The watchtower where they had been standing had collapsed due to the intensity of the attack and several students received injuries, some of them were seriously injured. William had taken the brunt of the damage and mitigated it to the best of his abilities, but it was still an attack from a centennial beast, so it was impossible to block completely. When the attack happened, the system made an arbitrary decision and forcefully changed William's subclass to Prince of Thunder. Because of this, the lightning bolt didn't cause much damage to his body and helped him resist the attack that could have easily claimed his life. The instructors were in the process of taking the injured students and transporting them to the infirmary. Andy appeared beside William and was about to carry him off when the shepherd shook his head in response. "Instructor, I'm fine," William said as he stood up from the ground. He even brushed off the dirt that had accumulated on his body to indicate that he was perfectly fine. Andy eyed the boy and made sure that he was indeed still capable of fighting before going to another student who had lost consciousness not far away from their location. Although he wanted to ask William questions, now was not the time for it. It was not only Andy, but several students and instructors, who had witnessed the event, looked at William in surprise. From every angle, he looked fine and healthy. His lean and toned body radiated youthful strength and his eyes were still bright and clear. Although he had some bruises here and there, they were only a minor concern for warriors in the battlefield. Aren't you going to wear anything?" Wendy asked as she looked at William's face. She was doing her best not to look down because William's body was visually attractive. Although they were in the midst of battle, Wendy couldn't keep herself from being charmed by her idol. "In a while," William said as he retrieved his wooden staff. Thunder roared in the heavens and lightning flashed like dragons in the sky as Colittle manipulated the elements to follow its bidding. Quetzalcoatl wasn't being idle either and flapped its mighty wings causing gusts of wind that blew the students off the ground. Wendy was almost blown away, but William firmly held her waist in place. The shepherd looked at these two creatures while thinking of his next plan of action. Help us. Please, save us. 2 words echoed inside his mind, and this time, he knew that they were real and not made up by his imagination. He could also tell that the voices were not coming from the 2 mythical beasts that were about to annihilate all of them. No, they came from the direction of the dungeon and they were pleading for him to help them. William tapped the ground with his staff, as he summoned a helper to fight by his side. Eternal guardian who guards the forest, help me in my time of need. William shouted. Come forth, Spire. A white portal appeared behind William's back as the guardian of the white-tailed deer tribe walked out of it. Its majestic body glowed in radiant light and served as a beacon to illuminate the darkness. Right now, the Spire was only a Class B, mid, beast. It was impossible for it to fight off against Centennial beasts who were labeled as Class S threats. Even so, Spire looked at these 2 beasts fearlessly. It had regained a boost in its ranks after William gave it the rewards that he promised during the battle for the position of head prefect in the Enchanted Forest. The students who had watched the competition for the head prefect of the martial class were quite familiar with this noble creature. They just never expected that it would appear in this battle against the dungeon outbreak. Behind it, 40 long-horned enchanted deer emerged from the portal and stood in a row facing off against the dungeon monsters, who stopped their advance a few hundred meters away from the watchtowers. These long-horned enchanted deer were Class C, mid, beasts and were more than capable of dealing with the small fries. Although reinforcements had arrived, no one believed that they would be able to win against the dungeon outbreak with their current numbers. Please, honor your promise and help us this once. William pleaded. Come forth, diabolical hell ape. Another portal appeared behind William's back, but this time, it was bigger than the one that Spire had come from. A giant ape, with 2 protruding horns on its head, came out of the portal. Its serpent tail hissed as it raised its head to look at the 2 mythical beasts in front of it. Are you sure you want to waste this one favor in dealing with these small fries, boy? The diabolical hell ape asked through telepathy. Everyone in the battlefield heard its voice inside their head. The dungeon monsters shuddered unconsciously because they felt a presence that was way beyond their league. Even the 2 mythical beasts were affected by the overpowering presence of the giant ape who was in a realm above theirs. The instructors of the academy were surprised because they recognized the towering beast that appeared on the battlefield. It was none other than the sovereign who ruled the forest just outside the Hellan Royal Academy, a creature that was at the peak of Class SS beasts. It was so powerful that even the dean of the academy had to be respectful to it. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that summoning the diabolical hell ape to fight against the dungeon outbreak was overkill. Indeed, it is a waste for me to summon you to such a small-scale battlefield, is what I'd like to say, but this is only true in the eyes of creatures as powerful as yourself, Your Excellency, William replied in a respectful tone. However, no matter how weak and short-lived humans are, every life is precious. If I can prevent even a single student of the Royal Academy from dying, then it is not a waste to ask for your help. I would not be able to sleep peacefully at night if I turned a blind eye and allowed the students to sacrifice their lives if it could be prevented. Although this favor is a one-time offer, I have no regrets. The Spire nodded its head in appreciation to William's words. It was a noble and righteous creature, and it liked how the red-headed boy denied that he wasted the favor given to him by the diabolical hell ape. The students and instructors who heard William felt conflicted. Some of them were quite thankful for William for calling the diabolical hell ape to help them in battle, while others felt ashamed that the shepherd had to resort to using his trump card because all of them were too weak to fight against the monsters in front of them. I will honor our agreement and help you once, the diabolical hell ape said as it stood in front of the defenders. It lived in a world where the law of the jungle was supreme. Although he understood William's words, he still felt that the young boy was pitiful for having no choice but to summon him. Several portals appeared behind him, as the rulers of the forest joined their sovereign to battle. Ironically, Psoglov was also there, who gave William the middle finger before facing the dungeon monster army in front of it. With this, the incident of Psoglov will no longer be brought up in the future as per our agreement. Do you understand? The diabolical hell ape glanced at the red-headed boy beside its feet. Yes, William answered firmly. We have no more debts between us. Psoglov, who was listening to the conversation, only snorted, but didn't say anything else since he was in the presence of his sovereign. As it should be, the diabolical hell ape nodded its head. So, which one should I deal with? Please take care of the colittle. Okay, it's too troublesome to fight against flying creatures. I'll handle this overgrown dog for you. But, who will face off against that winged serpent? My second master will, William replied with a grin. Second master, please, take care of the Quetzalcoatl. It is way out of my league. The corner of Oliver's lips twitched as he heard William's shameless request from his hiding place. The parrot monkey had hidden himself within the dark clouds in the sky, while observing the situation on the ground, but somehow, William was still able to find him. What Oliver didn't know was that the system had already detected his presence when he entered the skies of the battlefield. It was very easy for it to locate his position since all the allies were highlighted on the map of the territory. Fine. Oliver's voice echoed inside William's head. You owe me one, little Will. Thank you, second master, Will replied in his heart. Inside the dark clouds, Oliver looked at the giant winged serpent with a mischievous grin as if it was looking at a new toy. A fake centennial beast that is forcefully upgraded by miasma can't compare to the real deal. Oliver chuckled. Mistress asked for a souvenir. This snake will do quite nicely. Oliver was just like a little puppy facing off against an elephant, but he didn't even see the Quetzalcoatl as a threat. For him, the oversized winged serpent was only a little snake that he could easily trample under his talons without breaking a sweat. Wendy, stand at the rear, William said as he patted her head. I will handle this. Wendy nodded her head and immediately retreated to a safe place. Although she was worried about William, she didn't want to get in the way of this battle. Mama, let's go. Me. Ella transformed into an Angarian war ibex and allowed William to ride on her back. He then ordered the system to change his subclass to the Cavalier Job class. He then equipped the golden scaled light armor from the Ring of Conquest. This armor was made from the scales of the golden scaled crocodile that Celine had defeated 4 years ago. It boasted great physical and magical defense, and was custom made to change its size to fit William perfectly. When William donned his armor, he looked like a young prince that had come to save the princess from the evil dragon. He wasn't wearing a visor, but a winged circlet that highlighted his natural beauty. Instead of the wooden staff that he usually used to do battle, he summoned a spear that was made from the fangs of the thunder-horned wolf and the teeth of the golden-scaled crocodile. The spear was 2 meters long and its design was similar to the Stormacaller. The only difference was that it was made with barbed edges that would bring its victims a world of pain the moment it grazed them. Barbados was quite happy with his creation and named it Triam, the executioner of giants. All the girls who saw him couldn't stop themselves from sighing in admiration. Wendy, who had retreated to a safe distance, also looked at William with a reddened face. She looked at her prince in shining armor as her heart beat wildly inside her chest. Est, and Ian, who stood at the center of the defenders, wanted to roll their eyes in annoyance. Show off. Stupid, William. Even though the two boys resented William for taking the spotlight and stealing the heart of the ladies around them, they were still pinning their hopes on him. They believed that, as long as William was around, everything was going to be alright. This belief was deeply ingrained in their hearts, and would continue to believe them through the years to come. The two sides faced off against each other as everyone readied themselves for the decisive battle. It was at that very moment that the diabolical hell ape thumped its chest and issued a deafening roar. It then charged towards the colittle while coating its body in fire. Wait for me. I will save the two of you soon, William said inside his heart and hoped that the two voices that were calling out to the dungeon could hear him. He then pointed his spear forward and issued the order to attack. Charge. Ella bleated and issued a war cry to raise the stats of the deers who were accompanying them to battle. Spire, on the other hand, used its ability Call to Arms which further enhanced everyone's stats by 50%. It then followed behind William along with the long-horned enchanted deer that flanked his sides. Charge forward. Grant ordered and the rest of the defenders followed his orders. Show them the power of the Hellan Royal Academy. The students cheered in unison and joined the fray. William's show of strength had made their blood boil and they were raring to fight by his side. They didn't want to admit it, but in their eyes, William became the flag of hope that fluttered in the darkness. A flag that was about to lead them to victory. This was how the second round of the battle began and the land trembled in their wake. Chapter 171, Corrupted Dungeon Cores Part 1. Growls, roars, and shouts reverberated throughout the battlefield as both sides clashed against each other. Due to the presence of the diabolical hell ape, a powerful pressure had descended upon the dungeon creatures which made their movements and performance decrease significantly. William and Ella cut through the sea of monsters like a hot knife through butter. The spire, and the long-horned enchanted deer that flanked William's sides, bulldozed everything in their path. Due to the vast difference in strength, Colittle was mercilessly pummeled by the diabolical hell ape. Although it was a mythical beast, the Colittle was clearly not a match to the giant ape that was immune to fire. As a creature of the underworld, its resistance to miasma was very high. Even if it was surrounded by corrupted monsters, it moved unhindered and turned the lower-tiered monsters around it into ashes. The other rules of the forest under its command were all Class B beasts. They were more than enough to fight off the hordes of monsters coming their way. Psoglov wielded a bastard sword in its hand as it sliced one monster after another. It was as if it was venting out its frustration on the low-tiered beast for being forced to participate in a battle that was due to its carelessness. While the hordes of corrupted dungeon monsters and the allied forces collided, the true powerhouses were duking it out on both the land and air. Colittle relied on its lightning bolts and speed to deal with the giant ape, because it knew that it was no match against it in close combat. What it didn't know was that the giant ape's serpent tail was an expert in medium-ranged combat as well. It would spray acid and poison that was strong enough to melt boulders, from time to cut off the Colittle's path of retreat, and allow the diabolical hell ape to deliver a nasty blow that would send it flying. Since the magicians couldn't fire their spells towards the ground for fear of friendly fire, they focused their attention on the aerial monsters that hovered above their heads. Spells of different kinds flew in the air which illuminated their surroundings like trails made by fireworks. The winged serpent wanted to help the Colittle deal with the diabolical hell ape, but an annoying parrot monkey blocked its path. After their initial clash in the air, the winged serpent knew that it was no match against the weird-looking creature that had the head of a monkey and the body of a parrot. Its pitiful shrieks resounded across the sky as Oliver toyed with it to its heart's content. Help us. Save us. William could sense that the voices calling out to him were gradually weakening. He had a feeling that the time the voices stopped calling out to him, something sinister would take place inside the dungeon. Spire, I'll leave the clearing of the battlefield to you, William shouted. I'm heading inside the dungeon. Spire eyed him for a brief moment before nodding its majestic head. We will help to create a path for you. Be careful, young William. The diabolical hell ape heard their conversation, and the serpent tail immediately spat several fireballs the size of a car into the sea of monsters. The fireballs turned everything it hit into ashes, paving a road for the boy and his mama goat to traverse unchallenged. 20 longhorned enchanted deer took the lead and formed an arrow formation with William at its center. They used the path that the diabolical hell ape had created and ran in the direction of the dungeon. Spire ordered the remaining deer under its command to stay on the front line of the battlefield. The Eternal Guardian had a special cleansing ability that allowed it to purify the miasma in the bodies of the defenders. With its help, the humans were able to continue fighting without having to retreat to cure the miasma poisoning. 2 minutes later. Thank you, this is as far as you can take me. William thanked the deer who had accompanied him. Please, go back and help Spire protect the students. Are you sure you can do it alone, little Will? Oliver's voice sounded inside his head. Do you need me to follow you? Although Oliver was currently toying with the winged serpent, it would be very easy for him to subdue it if need be. The reason he came to Dawsbury was to ensure William's safety. A mere winged serpent was not as important as his mistress' future husband candidate. It will be fine, second master, William replied. I am never alone. Ah, that is true, Oliver commented. You are never alone. Very well, I'll play here for a while longer. Just call me if anything happens. Understood. Good luck with whatever you plan to do. After reassuring Oliver, William and Ella entered the entrance of the dungeon. William was expecting to fight his way through a horde of monsters, but the dungeon was practically empty. Before William could even do anything, a gate suddenly appeared in front of him. It opened very slowly, and the voices he had heard earlier urged him to enter. Since his purpose for coming was to find out who was calling out to him, William entered the gate while raising his guard. The moment the shepherd passed through it, the gate disappeared completely, leaving nothing behind. In a wide and spacious land, where dark clouds covered the sky, William stared at 2 black orbs, the size of a car's wheel, floating in front of him. Why you're finally here? Please, help us. Save us. William approached the 2 black orbs with caution. The miasma that the 2 orbs were releasing looked so sinister, that the red-headed boy didn't know if it was a good idea to get closer. Suddenly, the dark cloud of miasma transformed into a giant 2-headed dog with a serpentine tail. The 2-headed dog bared its fangs at the intruders on its territory. However, it didn't make any moves to attack William. It stayed in its position and shielded the 2 black orbs behind its back. William narrowed his eyes as he used his appraisal skill to read the information of the monster in front of them. Orthus. Dog of Twilight. Corrupted Guardian. Threat level, B, mid. Cannot be added to the herd. A 2-headed dog that guards the castles of the abyss rulers in the underworld. Wields the power of darkness and specializes in mobility. For a short period in time, it can split itself into 2 giant dogs with 1 head each. The serpentine tail on its back contains a powerful paralyzing poison that can paralyze a human for hours. Although the Orthus was a Class B, middle-tier monster, William felt that it was very different from the other Class B monsters that he had fought against. Soglov was a Class B monster, but the presence that it excluded was more powerful than the Orthus in front of William. Still, William didn't dare to underestimate his opponent and decided to go all out to defeat it. Let's go, everyone! William raised his spear and shouted. Gate open. A portal appeared behind the boy and a herd of Angarian war ibexes stepped into the dungeon room. Chrono, Aslan, and the others looked at the monster dog in front of them with sparkling eyes. They were sick and tired of getting bullied by James, and the other powerful experts in Lant, during their training lessons. It had been so long since William had called for them, so they endured the beatings of these powerful fighters as they honed their fighting techniques to the peak. The corner of William's lips twitched when the goats that answered his summons began to discuss with each other. Aslan, me. Can we bully that dog? Chronos, me. Let's bully it. Aslan, me. I agree. All the goats, me. Let's go. They didn't even wait for William's command and charged at the 2-headed dog as a group. It was like a dozen school kids were flocking towards a little puppy that had been presented to them by a teacher. The Orthus roared mightily and faced off against the Angarian war ibexes, at least, that was its original plan. However, it had underestimated how fast and how strong the war ibexes were. The dog yelped in pain as several horns collided with its body that sent it flying to the air. As it was falling, it noticed a single war ibex waiting for it where it would land. The war ibex had a mischievous look in its eyes as it turned around and lifted its hind legs to kick it. The poor dog became a volleyball ball that got passed around by the war ibexes that were venting out their frustration. In a desperate attempt to fight back, Orthus split its body into 2. Unfortunately, its actions only made the goats more excited as they, too, split into 2 teams. Aslan's and Chronos teams took 1 dog each and resumed their volleyball session. Your Fvorit stories on /o/v/lbn.cm. William didn't know whether he should laugh or cry at the pitiful guardian dog that was being bullied by the goats he had raised since they were kids. A/N. Fun fact. A young goat is also called a kid. Since the immediate threat was already being taken care of, William approached the 2 black orbs and checked their condition with his appraisal skill. Corrupted dungeon core. A dungeon core that was corrupted by miasma. Corruption progress, 95%. System, how do we resolve this issue? William inquired. To answer the host's question, there is only one way to handle a corrupted dungeon core, and that is to destroy it. However, even if the host did nothing, these two cores will shatter automatically once the miasma has corrupted it completely. Chapter 172, Corrupted Dungeon Cores Part 2. William frowned when he heard the system's explanation. He didn't come here to destroy anything. His reason for coming inside the dungeon was to save whoever had been calling to him and, from what he could gather, the ones calling for his help were these two dungeon cores who were almost completely corrupted by darkness. Help. Save. The voices were getting weaker like the light of a candle that was about to be snuffed out. William had no intention of destroying the two cores as he asked the system for a way to save them. According to the data that I have gathered in this world, there were several attempts in the past to save corrupted dungeon cores. However, none of them succeeded. Also, those who tried to purify them received the backlash of the miasma that had been absorbed by the cores and perished. Up to this date, no one had succeeded in purifying corrupted dungeon cores. Is there really no other way to save these two dungeon cores? William muttered in frustration. As if waiting for that cue, two black portals appeared in the sky above the dungeon cores. The colidal and the winged serpent fell from the portals and crashed into the dungeon floor, making it tremble. The two mythical beasts tried to move their bodies, but they were too injured to move. As the portals were about to close, Oliver, the parrot monkey, flew down from the sky. It looked at the Orthus who was being toyed with by the war ibexes, then at the two corrupted dungeon cores, before it finally turned to William. Oliver looked at the young boy with an amused expression on his face before he gracefully landed on William's shoulder. So, this is the reason why you came here alone, Oliver said. Are you thinking of saving these twin cores? Second Master, why are you here? William inquired. Why are the two mythical beasts here? What is happening outside? I just arrived and you're already bombarding me with questions. Oliver snorted. You don't have to worry about what is happening outside. That overgrown ape, along with the deer, are cleaning the mobs. The peanut galler, I mean the humans, are also helping with the cleanup. About these two beasts. They opened a portal in order to escape. I followed behind them to see where they were going. Luckily, they decided to return to the dungeon cores, so I am now here with you. William glanced at the two mythical beasts who seemed to have regained a bit of their reasoning. They were looking at him with pleading eyes. It was very obvious that they wanted William to save the twin cores who were the hearts and souls of the dungeon. Well then, let's get back to the topic. Do you plan to save these twin cores? Oliver inquired. Twin cores are actually very rare, you know. A dungeon being formed with twin cores is a 1 in 200,000 chance. Meaning, in every 200,000 dungeons, only one with twin cores will be formed. I want to save them, but I've been told that it is impossible. Yes, it is impossible if you try to save them as cores. Why don't you just absorb them? It will be a boon to your power if you absorb the power of a dungeon core. You know, there are even people who specifically conquer dungeons in order to harness the power of the dungeon cores. They are called dungeon conquerors. Oliver wanted to say more, but he felt that he would be overstepping his bounds if he tried to mention William's father, Maxwell. The person who single-handedly fended off the demon invasion towards the Silver Moon continent. The one and only dungeon conqueror on the southern continent. When the two mythical beasts heard the word absorb, they growled at the parrot monkey, but the latter paid them no mind. A parrot monkey doesn't lose sleep over the opinion of sheep, Oliver snorted. So what if Little Will wanted to absorb these twin cores? What can the two of you do about it? The two guardian beasts tried to stand, but they were too injured and too weak to do anything. The goats who were playing with the Orthus weren't paying attention to the discussion. The only thing in their mind was to bully their new toy, before they returned to Lant and get bullied themselves. Second Master, is there really no other way? Why are you so keen on saving these twin cores? Is there something you're not telling me? William nodded his head. These two cores had been asking me to save them since the dungeon outbreak started. Oh. Oliver looked at the two cores with interest. Such a thing happened? Interesting. Host, the corruption has progressed to 97%. According to my estimate, it will take less than 10 minutes before these two cores are fully corrupted. Second Master. There is a way, but the way you are going to save them is different from what you have in mind. You see, Will, once their bodies are corrupted there is no turning back for them. This is why you should never bother trying to save the cores as they are. However, if you were to save the souls of these twin cores, then it is very possible to do that. Even so, there is a chance that you will be corrupted by the miasma. Are you sure you want to do this? William looked at the twin cores, then looked down on the ground. I want to save them, but I don't want to get corrupted. Gramps, and the rest of my family, will be sad if that were to happen to me. Why didn't you add Mistress to the list of people who will be sad if you get corrupted? Hello? It was the Mistress that sent me here to help you, Oliver nagged. Well, she didn't say it explicitly, but I'm sure that this was what she wanted me to do. Of course, Master will be sad too, that's why. Second Master, you need to think of a way that I can save the dungeon cores without becoming corrupted in the process. DIs cover new Tories at nve/lbin.c/o. Ha, why are all of you Ainsworth so greedy? It's either you play it big or not at all. Geez, fine, there is a way, but it will be very painful. Are you sure you still want to do it? Oliver felt that it was a pity that William didn't want to absorb the cores to boost his powers, but since he had become fond of the boy, he was willing to turn a blind eye and let him have his way. I won't get corrupted. You won't. Then let's do it. Fine, but you have to change your what was that again? Job class. Oliver tilted his head to the side. Anyways, whatever you call it, you need to change it to Prince of Darkness. That is the only way for you to resist the miasma corruption. Host, the Prince of Darkness job class is currently disabled. It can't be used at this point in time because you didn't meet the necessary requirements to open this prestige class in the first place. Last time, it was forcefully activated due to the Collar of Wisteria. What are the necessary requirements for it? The host must surrender to the darkness first and allow your soul to be corrupted by the God of Darkness. Chapter 173, Corrupted Dungeon Course Part 3. Are you serious? William couldn't believe what the system had told him. The job class that he had used in the battle against the Cyclops could only be unlocked if his soul was corrupted by the God of Darkness. Host, the job class Prince and Princess of Darkness is a prestige class that belongs to the devout follower of the God of Darkness. To be honest, it is impossible for you to unlock it. It was only possible because you used the Collar of Wisteria as a medium to sacrifice 5 years of your magic power to use the job class for a short period of time. How can this be? William was starting to feel helpless. What am I supposed to do? Oliver noticed the change in William's expression and frowned. What are you dilly-dallying for? Have you switched that job class or whatever to Prince of Darkness? Hurry, we don't have much time. As second master, the Prince of Darkness is not available, William replied. I can't use it. Is that so? Oliver knew that William wouldn't lie to him at this crucial moment, so he had no choice but to believe him. Okay, just switch to the Dark Mage. I just hope that your soul will be able to endure the corruption and the pain. Don't worry, I will assist you. With the two of us together, it will work, probably. Host, the core's corruption has progressed to 98%. William took 2 deep breaths in order to calm himself. He knew that he was taking a big risk in attempting what he was about to do, but he had to do it. Something inside him was compelling him to do it. What William didn't know was that, deep within his sea of consciousness, the chess piece of the king started to vibrate. The time for it to awaken was still not at hand, but it had sensed William's desire and decided to lend its strength. Issei, who was napping in the Temple of the 10,000 Gods, felt his divinity start to move and immediately investigated the cause. The only person whom he had given his divinity to was William. Since the chess piece was moving, it meant that his sworn brother had encountered something very troublesome. It's still too early, Issei frowned as he observed William's projection from inside his palace. Still, nothing ventured, nothing gained. The greater the challenge, the greater the gains. Good luck, little brother. After changing his job class to the Dark Mage, William prepared himself to touch the 2 cores with his hands at the same time. Listen to me, whatever happens do not lose yourself, Oliver said with a serious expression as he hovered above William's head. The moment you touch those 2 cores, the miasma will slam on your sea of consciousness like a tidal wave. You must resist, and keep your consciousness at all costs. If you fail, then your body will be corrupted by miasma. Are you sure you're not going to change your mind? No, William shook his head. I am ready. Good. Oliver nodded and spread his wings wide. Let's start. William gritted his teeth and touched both cores at the same time. Immediately, the miasma traveled through his hands and up to his arms, instantly turning it black. William felt something slam into the core of his very being as his soul shuddered from the impact. This was the second time he'd felt something like this. The first time was when the truck appeared in the Cycle of Reincarnation and sent him flying to be born in this world. The impact had been so strong that it damaged William's soul. It caused him to be unable to regain consciousness for more than a month after he was born. Fortunately, due to the incident with TruckCon, William's soul had been strengthened after it had recovered. It was further strengthened by Celine's hell training inside his sea of consciousness. Although he wanted to faint from the pain, Oliver's encouragement and his mama Ella's bleeding had reached his ears. He endured the corruption of the miasma as his body was slowly being stained black. Sometime later, a patch of bright light, the size of a gold coin, appeared in the center of the 2 dungeon cores. Oliver hurriedly used his powers to pull the souls of the twin cores out from the bodies that were on the verge of collapse. It was a painstaking process as Oliver divided his attention between supplying William some of his strength and extracting the souls from the 2 cores. The 2 guardian beasts knew that this was the turning point, so they channeled the remaining power in their bodies into William. They were also doing their best to help the person who decided to save their masters from complete destruction. The goats had stopped playing with the Orthus, because the guardian beast had also regained some of its sanity. It joined its seniors in helping William resist the corruption as its way of atonement. Right now, William's whole body had been stained black. Even his hair and eyes hadn't escaped the miasma's corruption. Although it was very painful, the years he had spent being trained by Celine and Oliver ironically helped him endure the torturous ordeal he was currently experiencing. Inside his sea of consciousness, William's soul floated above blue waters that were also slowly being stained with the black miasma. In time, the sea had turned completely black. Suddenly a single strand of darkness, as thin as a thread, rose up from the corrupted waters and pierced William's chest. It wormed its way inside William's soul and successfully infiltrated his core. After that single strand had been absorbed, more strands flew into the air and attempted to pierce William's chest once again. However, a powerful divinity blocked them. The chess piece hovered above William's body and shielded his soul from further harm. It had waited for that single strand of darkness to pierce William's chest before it made its move. The young boy was not able to resist the single strand of darkness that attacked him because he had already lost consciousness at that point in time. The chess piece could have prevented the incident from happening, but it chose to wait. It had waited for that opportunity because it believed that its host would need that power in the future. It also understood that William was not strong enough to consume more than one strand, so it didn't allow him to absorb more. An hour passed, as Oliver almost crashed to the ground due to exhaustion. The two souls of the dungeon cores floated above William's body and danced like little children. The guardians looked at this scene in happiness as their bodies slowly disappeared into particles of light. They had completed their duty and it was now time for them to disappear from the world. Once the dungeon cores had been destroyed, the dungeon monsters that they had birthed would also cease to exist. The only proof that the guardian beasts had existed were the two centennial grade cores, and one high grade core that laid on the ground, waiting for their new owner to pick them up. 2 hours later, William felt something wet hitting the side of his face. He tried to open his eyes, but they refused to obey his commands. Using all the willpower that he could muster, he forced his eyes open, only to find Ella licking the side of his face in an attempt to wake him up. Me. William wanted to reply, but just opening his eyes was already a monumental task for him. He stared at his mama to tell her that he was fine, so she wouldn't have to worry about him. Ella understood what he wanted to convey to her and nodded her head in acknowledgement. Oh, you're finally awake. Oliver's monkey head suddenly appeared in his vision. Well, it seems that your soul has received significant damage. I'm guessing that right now you are unable to move your body. But, don't worry. It will only take 2 to 3 days at most before you regain control of your body. If you can understand my words, blink twice. William blinked twice to show Oliver that he had understood him. The parrot monkey nodded its head and continued to talk to William. I still need to discuss a few things with you, but that will have to wait until you get better. I just wanted to tell you that we succeeded. Don't think about anything. Don't worry about anything. Just rest. That is all you need to do. Leave the rest to me and your mama Ella. Me. Ella bleated in agreement. William blinked twice before closing his eyes. He was really at his limit and sleep pulled him into her embrace. When Ella and Oliver heard William's deep breathing, both of them sighed in relief. The other goats had already returned to Lant and only the two of them remained inside the dungeon protecting William. Soon, the sounds of running footsteps could be heard in the distance. Me. I know, Miss Ella. For now, I'll hide inside William's shadow and guard him from there. Me. Oliver's body sank into William's shadow using his shadow bind ability. He knew that William would be unable to protect himself at this crucial time, so he decided to become his bodyguard just in case there were malicious people around that would attempt to harm him. A minute after Oliver merged with William's shadow, Est, Ian, Isaac, Kenneth, Wendy, along with Grant, Andy, and a cleric, appeared in the dungeon room. When they saw William lying on the ground, Wendy immediately panicked and ran to his side in a hurry. She was about to lift William's body off the ground when Est hurriedly stopped her. Don't move his body, Est shouted. He might be injured somewhere. Let the cleric have a look at him first. Wendy nodded her head, but she didn't move away from William's body. Instead, she held his hand and looked at the half-elf's pale face with an anxious expression. Est and Ian didn't say anything about Wendy's actions because they too were worried about William's condition. They waited patiently for the cleric to run a diagnostic spell on William's body so they could see his current situation. How is he? Grant asked. He's suffered from minor internal injuries and is seriously weakened, the cleric replied. While his life isn't in immediate danger, he will need a few rejuvenation potions, an elixir, and plenty of rest to fully recover. Grant and Andy sighed in relief as they exchanged a glance with each other. Although the rejuvenation potions and elixir cost a lot, the academy would shoulder the expenses. It was a small price to pay for the sacrifices that the boy had made in order to ensure that no life was lost during this mission to subjugate the Dungeon of Roaring Corridors. Visit nfelbin.cm for Wbnovels. Chapter 174, a mission that takes precedence. Are you feeling thirsty, Will? Will blinked twice. Here you go, Wendy said as she gently assisted William to drink a glass of water. After his thirst was quenched, the young lady carefully supported his head and laid it back on the soft pillow. The corner of Est's and Ian's lips started to twitch when they saw this scene, but they didn't do anything about it. They just cursed William for being shameless in using his current condition to take advantage of Wendy's kindness. How about I give you a foot massage? Ian asked. They say that it helps the body recover faster because the foot is connected to many internal organs of the body. Ian didn't wait for William's approval and started to knead the half-elf's foot with a smile on his face. Does it feel good? Ian inquired. It does? Then I'm going to continue. If William had been able to speak then he would have already hurled a long string of expletives at Ian for applying so much pressure to his foot that it felt that it was tearing apart. If he could have moved his foot then he would have already kicked the snot-nosed pansy and sent him flying out of the window. Since he couldn't move, and couldn't speak, William could only curse his mortal enemy while shedding tears of pain and sadness. Wendy, who saw this scene, felt that something was off, but Ian merely told her that William was only shedding tears of joy because his massage was so good. Est couldn't bear to see William hurting so much, so he cleared his throat and made eye contact with Ian to not bully the defenseless boy. Ian clicked his tongue as he reluctantly eased the pressure that he was applying to William's foot. He then gave the red-headed boy a proper massage which made the latter feel so good that he fell asleep. It was at that moment when the door of the room opened and Kenneth came in carrying a bucket of warm water. He's still asleep? Kenneth asked as he carried the bucket near William's bed. Well, I guess it won't make a difference whether he is asleep or awake. Kenneth then proceeded to unbutton William's pajamas. Seeing his actions, Wendy immediately blushed and asked the delicate-looking silver-haired boy what he was planning to do. What am I about to do? Kenneth looked at Wendy with a mischievous smile. Of course, I plan to help clean William's body by washing it. He's the type that likes to bathe every day. Do you want to do it in my place? And no. Wendy stuttered. I am just asking. I see. Kenneth nodded, but the smile on his face didn't disappear. What a shame. After taking William's shirt off, Kenneth started to clean his body using a wet hand towel, then drying it immediately using another towel. His movements were so precise that those who were watching him felt that Kenneth was used to doing such things. Feeling their gazes on him, Kenneth decided to talk as he cleaned William's upper body. 2 years ago, my brother fell ill and suffered a similar condition to William. Kenneth began his explanation. He was unable to move, so it was up to me to help him eat, drink, and clean his body. Seeing William like this reminded me of home, so I decided to help him clean his body since he likes taking baths every day. Still, my little brother's body can't compare to William's. Seeing this strong and lean body, I am feeling envious. William was a martial expert, so his body was very fit. If you added the aesthetics of a half-elf, then you would get a good-looking guy with a very attractive physique. After cleaning the upper part of William's body, Kenneth was about to remove the sleeping boy's pants when Wendy immediately retreated to the corner of the room. Seeing her reaction, Kenneth gave an understanding smile as he lowered William's pants. And Ian turned around to look at Wendy, who was sneakily peeking through the gaps in her fingers. After noticing that and Ian were looking at her, Wendy immediately closed the gap in her fingers and turned around to face the wall. It took Kenneth less than 5 minutes to clean William's lower body. He then went to the shepherd's closet to pick out a new set of clothes for him to wear. When the red-headed boy was properly clothed, Kenneth left the room to handle the daily affairs of the martial class along with Priscilla. Before they went to fight against the dungeon outbreak, William appointed Kenneth to be the secretary of the first-year martial division. Since their head prefect was not around, it fell to the officers to ensure that the rest of the students were behaving properly. The second, third, and fourth years still hadn't returned from their missions. The dungeon outbreaks that were happening in other places in the Hellan kingdom were getting more and more intense, causing the Hellan army to feel more of the pressure. Because of this, the king was forced to send messengers all across the kingdom, hiring mercenaries and other armed groups to help resist the dungeon outbreak. This was also why the first year's success created a big impact on the defenders of the other towns. They didn't expect that the outbreak in Dawsbury would be settled in less than a day. Of course, this was due to William calling for reinforcements to assist them in battle. If not for Spire and his herd, the diabolical Hell Ape, and William's mysterious second master, the outbreak of the Roaring Quarters wouldn't have been that easy to subjugate. At the Forsaken Catacombs, where the third years of the Hellan Royal Academy were stationed, an intense battle was currently taking place. Carter fired several empowered fireballs at the skeletal legionnaire that was rampaging across the battlefield. The skeletal monster, that was over 2 meters in height, was carrying a giant war axe, which it brandished left and right to reap the lives of the soldiers who were trying to fend it off. Thank you, Professor, one of the soldiers shouted as the skeletal legionnaire burst into flames. We are not out of the woods yet. Focus on your surroundings. Carter ordered as he fired a few more fireballs at the skeletal army that was slowly advancing towards them. The professor was very irritated because the sudden dungeon outbreaks forced him to put his plan on hold for an indefinite period of time. Because of the sudden incident, he hadn't had time to make more candies to strengthen his hold on the talented students of the third-year Magic Division class. Of course, that was only half of the reason why Carter was feeling irritated. His superior had also tasked him to investigate the reason for these dungeon outbreaks that were happening in the Hellan kingdom. The reason for this was because a similar thing had happened in the Demon Continent 4 months ago. Carter's superior believed that this was done by an unknown group, or organization, that was hiding in the shadows. Without knowing this group's motive, or to whom their loyalty was given, the higher demon thought that it would be quite dangerous to leave them at large. The demon race had suffered big losses during the dungeon outbreaks that had happened in their territory. They feared that the perpetrators were only conducting further tests in the human lands, before they returned to the northern continent and used the higher-ranked dungeons to start another dungeon outbreak. If that were to happen, then a calamity would befall their race. This was something that they couldn't allow to happen. Since this mission took precedence, Carter had no choice but to obey and get to the bottom of this incident. Just what are they after? Carter thought as he continued his onslaught on the battlefield. Are they anti-humans or anti-demons? How big is their organization? Visit nfelbin.cm for Wbnovels. Carter knew that the answers to his question would not be answered soon. So he focused his attention on pushing back the skeletal army and joined the experts when they proceeded to head towards the dungeon core. Perhaps he would find the answers he was looking for after he had seen the source of the problem with his own eyes. Oh, this is quite interesting, James chuckled as he read Ezio's report. William managed to accomplish something amazing. As expected of my grandson. James was all smiles as he read the report in his hand. His smile didn't last for long as he read the current situation on Matthew's end on the battlefield. His grandson Matthew, and his fiancée, Leah, had gone missing while carrying out a mission inside the lair of the ancient queen, which was located within the Duchy of Aberdeen. According to Ezio's report, Leah had suffered a serious injury when she tried to save Matthew from the attack of a Lamia Queen. Leah then used a special ability that made both of them disappear from the clutches of Lamia Queen that was hellbent on ending their lives. This was witnessed by one of the survivors who managed to escape from the dungeon. He immediately reported the mission's failure to the officers defending the front line, and this piece of information found its way into Ezio's hands. James knew that now was not the time to brag about William's accomplishment and immediately held a conference in Lant. He decided to bring an elite team to Aberdeen and help rescue his grandson inside the dungeon. For James, every member of the Ainsworth family was precious. There were only a handful of them in the world, and losing even one of them would be a tragedy. After a discussion with his subordinates, it was decided that James, Mordred, John, and Jekyll would provide reinforcements for Matthew in Aberdeen. This group of 4 would be able to travel faster by riding on the giant hawk, Blitz, who was John's animal companion. The rest of the experts would stay in Lant to handle unforeseen events, like the dark-scaled crocodile incident that almost destroyed their hometown. As always, Owen had been assigned to be the temporary leader of Lant while Mordred was away. This was the best course of action that James could make after taking everything into consideration. Chapter 175, filled to the brim with love r18. EU updates tnvel/by.com. Disclaimer, this chapter contains scenes not suitable for young audiences. You've already watched enough H to know what I'm talking about. Also, please answer the comments I placed on my author notes. It is very important. Thank you. Leah, you don't have to force yourself, you just recovered from your injury. Matthew tried to persuade his lover to stay in their hiding place until she was fully recovered. No, Leah shook her head. If I stay here, I'll go crazy worrying about you. They were currently hiding inside a cave within the lair of the ancient queen. They were part of the group that was tasked to break the dungeon core and end the threat of the monster outbreak. The dungeon had 50 floors, and their team of 100 people managed to reach the 40th floor before they were stopped by a monster army that seemed to have waited for their arrival. 3 Class S corrupted Lamia queens, along with a horde of Class C Lamias, ambushed their group from different directions. The battle was intense, but they managed to defeat 2 of the 3 Lamia queens while fighting with everything they had. During the battle, several soldiers were charmed by the Lamia queens and turned against their compatriots. Matthew was one of the few men who managed to resist the charm spell. However, the Lamia queen used that opportunity to close the gap and deliver a powerful tail attack that sent Matthew slamming into the wall of the dungeon. The Lamia queen threw its poison dagger as a finishing blow to end Matthew's life, but Leah blocked it using her body. Because of this, she was seriously injured and poisoned at the same time. If not for her affinity with water magic, she might have died along with Matthew in that fight. In that moment of desperation, she used her water teleport ability to bring herself, and Matthew, to a random place in the dungeon with a body of water. Fortunately, they landed at the base of a waterfall that had a hidden cave behind its falling waters. The unique location allowed them to hide themselves without worrying about the monster's pursuit. Leah managed to purify the poison in her body using her water magic, but it had weakened her greatly. Even so, she still used her healing magic to tend to Matthew's injuries, which almost made her collapse completely. She only closed her eyes to rest when Matthew finally regained the color in his face. A few hours passed before Matthew awoke from his sleep. When he saw Leah's pale expression, he immediately used the potions he had exchanged points for in the academy to nurse her back to health. A day later, Leah woke up and the two embraced each other for a long time. They were thankful that both of them were still alive and in each other's arms. Matthew became silent as he hugged his fiancée. He lovingly kissed her forehead and Leah could feel the love he had for her. Both of them knew that they couldn't stay in the cave forever. Matthew volunteered to scout their surroundings and find out whether it was possible to escape from the dungeon. However, Leah didn't want him to go alone, and insisted that he take her along with him. Matthew, don't leave me here, Leah pleaded as she hugged the man she loved. If you do, I'll make you regret it. I won't, Matthew whispered. If this is really what you want then I'll agree, but I have a condition. I agree. I haven't said anything yet. Whatever it is, I agree. Leah softly patted Matthew's back as she closed her eyes to lean on his chest. I don't want to lose you. Matthew hugged her tighter because he, too, didn't want to lose her. Leah, after this is all over, let's get married. Instead of answering Matthew's proposal, Leah held both sides of his face and kissed him passionately on the lips. Her sudden action ignited Matthew's feelings for her and soon, both of them were lost in their love for each other. Leah laid within the makeshift bed that they had made inside the cave and looked up at Matthew with teary eyes. Are you sure about this? Matthew asked. Yes, Leah answered. I don't know what the future holds for the two of us, but right now, all I want is to be one with you. Matthew lowered his face to kiss his beloved and wiped the tears from her eyes. I love you, Leah. I love you, too, Matt. Matthew kissed his lover one more time before removing the academy uniform that hid her beautiful body. He stared at the white, thin pieces of fabric that covered Leah's womanly assets and removed them one after the other. Although the cave was a little dark, Matthew had learned the spell Dark Vision because he often accompanied William for nighttime strolls in the countryside. He had also applied the Dark Vision to Leah, so both of them could see in the darkness of the cave. Matthew fell into a daze as he looked at his lover's beautiful body. Leah giggled on their makeshift bed and allowed him to look at her entirety. You're beautiful, Leah, Matthew said with genuine sincerity as he lowered his head to kiss those enticing peaks that stood proud in front of him. He kissed her left breast as his hand groped the other. Leah's breast fit perfectly in the palm of his hand and he was surprised at how soft it was. Soon, the cave was filled with muffled moans as Leah did her best to hold back her voice. Matthew only stopped fondling her body when his lover begged that she couldn't hold it any longer. He kissed Leah's lips one more time, before he lowered his hip to complete their union. The moment Matthew claimed her maidenhood, a soft gasp of pain and pleasure escaped Leah's lips. Matthew didn't rush and gently brought his lover to the throes of pleasure. With every thrust of his hips, Leah could feel herself opening up to him. Soon, both of them reached the peak together. Matthew shuddered as he released his essence deep inside her, staining her with his color and marking her as his woman. He filled her up to the brim with his love. Leah, on the other hand, felt like she was melting. It was as if she was being conquered, which brought shivers down her spine. The pleasure it brought her was so intense that for a brief moment, her world turned completely white. When she regained her vision, Matthew was panting while hugging her body close to his chest. She shuddered in delight at the thought of doing it all over again. As if hearing her thoughts, Matthew kissed her lips passionately and once again moved his hips to bring her to the heights of pleasure. Within that dark cave, Matthew and Leah made love to each other as if there was no tomorrow. When they finally stopped, Leah laid her head on Matthew's chest and fell asleep due to exhaustion. Matthew enclosed his beloved in a protective embrace, before he, too, closed his eyes to sleep. Meanwhile, in Celine's house, the beautiful dark sorceress was looking at her crystal ball with a calm expression. She was observing the dungeon outbreaks that were happening in the Hellan Kingdom through the eyes of her familiars. It wasn't the first time that Celine had spied on the affairs of the Hellan Kingdom, so she was quite knowledgeable with the location of the important cities that the king had given special attention to. She could see the vast hordes of monsters that were trying to make their way through the city, but were being stopped by the stubborn defenders who held their ground like their lives depended on it. Celine knew that her potion of miasma was not enough to corrupt a dungeon core completely, so she assumed that the organization had used a powerful medium to increase its potency. So this was their plan all along, Celine muttered. As a dark sorceress, she was aware that aside from the monsters, a hidden threat was currently creeping into the lands of the Hellan Kingdom. 10th circle spell, Celine said with confidence. Is this a type of revenge on the Hellan Kingdom for banning the use of dark magic? Looks like my acquaintances are more ambitious than I originally thought they were. Celine wanted to laugh out loud, but she pushed down that urge using her amazing self-control. Perhaps this is also a blessing in disguise. This kind of spell can't be erased by clerics or any users of holy magic. The corner of Celine's lips curled up into a sneer. The only ones who can break this curse are dark magicians. When the king realizes what is going on, it will already be too late. Celine was impressed by the amount of planning that the organization had made for their operation. The dungeon outbreak was only a cover-up to serve as a distraction, while the real danger was slowly spreading like a swarm of ants that was marching across the land. What Celine and the organization didn't know was that a certain shepherd, who was currently sound asleep, would make the castle that they had painstakingly built up in the sky, shatter into 1,000 pieces. Chapter 176, New Members of the Family Part 1. 2 days had passed since William and the rest of the first-year students returned to the academy. The red-headed boy was now able to move his body, but he was still not back to his peak condition. It was also at that moment when news of Matthew's and Leah's disappearance reached his ears. Initially, his first thought was to go to Aberdeen and join the rescue mission to find them. However, he knew that with his current condition, he would only become a hindrance instead of a help if he chose to go. Are you worried about Matthew and Leah? Oliver asked. He was currently hiding in William's shadow in order to protect him until he fully recovered from his injury. Yes, William answered. I wish I could go to Aberdeen and look for them. You don't have to worry about that. I received a message from Mistress that your grandpa and a few of the veterans of Lant had gone to Aberdeen to look for Matthew and Leah. Really? That's good. William sighed in relief knowing that his gramps had gone to save his big brother and big sister. He was sure that James wouldn't stop until he found the 2 teenagers inside the dungeon. The red-headed boy was currently inside his dormitory room and no one, aside from the officers and Wendy, were allowed to visit him. Right now, Kenneth was with Priscilla and doing his duty as secretary of the Solaris dormitory. This gave Oliver the opportunity to talk to William and discuss important matters. Will, there is something that I need to tell you, Oliver said with a serious expression. I was planning to wait for a day more, but these 2 kids are getting anxious. As if waiting for Oliver to mention the 2 of them, the twin souls flew out of William's shadow and hovered in front of his eyes. They twinkled like 2 stars, one yellow, one red. I'm glad that the 2 of you are safe. William smiled as he gazed at the 2 souls in front of him. The 2 souls bounced up and down as a mysterious melody reached William's ears. William could vaguely understand that they were trying to talk to him, but he couldn't understand their language. Fortunately, Oliver came to the rescue and translated their message for William. These 2 kids want you to help them revive their loyal guardians, Oliver translated as he too flew out of William's shadow. Do you remember those 3 beasts in the dungeon core room? These 2 want them to be reborn. William blinked when he finally understood what the 2 souls wanted to do. He had completely forgotten about the mythical beasts because back then, he had lost consciousness while trying to resist the corruption. There was simply no opportunity for William to worry about others in that crucial period. You said revive. William gave Oliver an inquiring gaze. Did the guardians die? Yes. Oliver nodded. Just like how these two kids lost their outer core, the guardians also lost their physical bodies. However, the twins used their remaining power to bind the souls of their guardians to their beast cores. Oliver waved his wing and 3 black, high-grade cores floated in the air in front of William. Although the two succeeded in binding the guardian's soul to their beast cores, this is only a temporary stopgap. In 2 more days, the souls will completely dissipate from the cores and they will be lost forever. William sighed as he looked at the 3 floating cores. If he absorbed them, he might have gained an incredible amount of experience points. But, seeing the 2 bouncing souls in front of him, he no longer had the heart to carry out his plan. How can I help? William asked. He didn't want to waste any more time because there was a possibility that a visitor would come knocking on his door. Since time was limited, it would be best to cut to the chase and get it over with. We need to perform a ritual in which these 3 beast cores will be used as catalysts in order to revive the guardians, Oliver explained. They will no longer have memories of their past life, and would simply be reborn as new beings that are no longer tied to a dungeon. Naturally, they will be bound to you. Just think of it as acquiring 3 pets to raise for free. 3 pets to raise for free. William felt slightly complicated. It was not as if he wasn't interested in raising the 3 beasts. He had already seen them and their capabilities, however, he didn't know if he was ready for such a responsibility. Unfortunately, the 2 souls were busy nuzzling his cheeks as if they were trying to butter him up to help with the revival ritual. In the end, William agreed and Oliver began to write a magic circle in the center of the room in order to start the ritual. When he was done, Oliver placed the 3 beast cores at the center of the magic circle. I need a pint of your blood in order to make this work, Oliver stated. Is that fine with you? Only my blood? William inquired. Nothing else. Just your blood. In short, these creatures will be born with your blood running through their veins. Oliver smirked. I guess calling them pets is inappropriate. They're more like your firstborn kids. Congratulations. You are now a father of triplets. Ha ha ha, very funny. Mistress always tells me that I have a good sense of humor. Oliver gave William a serious glance as he conjured a shadow dagger in the air. Well then, are you ready? William took a deep breath before nodding his head. As soon as Oliver deemed him ready, the shadow dagger flew and stabbed him in the arm. The young boy's blood gushed out like a fountain. Surprisingly, his blood didn't fall on the magic circle. Instead, it was magically siphoned to the 3 beast cores as the magic circle started to glow brightly. Oliver chanted in the background and spoke in a language that William didn't understand. As the lights of the circle grew brighter, William could feel a growing connection with the beast cores that were starting to vibrate. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light erupted from the center of the runic formation. The young boy was forced to close and shield his eyes until the light receded. It is done. Oliver's proud words reached his ears. When William opened his eyes to look at the result of the ritual, he found 3 creatures looking up at him from beside his feet. One of them was a golden snake. It was only a meter long and its golden reptilian eyes looked at William as if it was looking at its daddy. Suddenly, it crawled up William's leg, until it reached his neck where it happily coiled itself. The baby golden snake flicked its tongue against William's cheeks as if giving him a kiss. Before William could do anything about the baby snake that was looped around his neck, 2 barks sounded near his feet. A puppy with black fur and blue stripes that resembled lightning bolts, pressed its small paws on William's right foot and barked. It resembled a baby husky and looked very cute and adorable. It was half as big as William's arm. William always thought that huskies were half dog and half wolf creatures. Of course, this was his only assumption. According to the magazine he had read back on Earth, huskies were entirely different from wolves, and were of different species. Even so, some people believed that somewhere along the line, the 2 species mingled and thus the husky was born. Another bark caught William's attention and the boy immediately looked towards his left foot. There, another puppy stood and looked up at him with its tongue sticking out of its mouth. It was a bit smaller than the baby husky and looked very similar to a Boston Terrier. The terrier's fur was a combination of white and dark golden fur. It felt so smooth to the touch that William wasn't able to stop himself from brushing its back with his hand. His chapter is updated by NVEL, vine.co/m. The shepherd felt like his heart was melting because of how cute they were. He patted the heads of the 2 puppies which made their tails wag like there was no tomorrow. Ella watched this scene with a gentle gaze. Somehow, William's second mother felt that their small herd had grown a little bigger. Chapter 177, New Members of the Family Part 2. From now on, your name will be Dia, William said as he kissed the golden snake that was coiled around his neck. Hiss. I'm glad you liked it. Hiss. Woof. Ruff. The 2 puppies tried to get William's attention by calling out to him. Currently, the red-headed boy was lying on the bed, while his 3 little guardians lay beside him. Dia was still coiled around William's neck, like a second slave collar that wouldn't go away. Dia just received her name from William and was very happy about it. She nuzzled William's cheeks to show that she really liked the name he gave her. However, the 2 puppies didn't want to lose out so they whined, while pressing on William's chest like 2 spoiled children. They wanted their master to give them names as well. William chuckled as he patted the 2 puppies' heads and coaxed them to be patient. Okay, I've decided. William grinned as he tickled the baby husky's chin. From now on, your name will be Thor. Woof. Thor barked before he started licking William's cheeks. Its body glowed briefly as the lightning bolt pattern on its fur crackled with electricity. Seeing that his brother and sister had been given names, the little terrier whined to catch William's attention. Don't worry, I'm also thinking of a good name for you. William coaxed the puppy that was throwing a tantrum. William looked at the adorable terrier and a playful smile appeared on his face. Your name will be Ragnar. Ruff. Ragnar joined Thor in licking William's cheeks, which made the shepherd giggle. I think I understand what being a parent feels like by looking at these 3 kids, William thought. Although he had raised the goats with love and care, the feeling that the 3 newly born guardians gave him was different. He could sense a very close connection to them. A connection forged by blood that made him feel like he had indeed become a father of 3. After the 3 had settled down, William introduced them to his mama Ella. Dia, Thor, Ragnar, this is Ella. She's my mama, so that makes her your grandma, William said. Hiss. Woof. Ruff. The 3 guardians looked at Ella with innocent gazes. The Angarian goat looked back at them and bleated. Me. Hiss. Woof. Ruff. Ella walked closer and licked Thor's cheeks. After that she licked Ragnar's cheeks and finally, nuzzled Dia's head. Dia uncoiled herself from William's neck and transferred herself onto Ella's neck. Hiss. Me. The new grandma and granddaughter pair chatted with each other, while the 2 puppies jumped off the bed and acted like spoiled children who wanted to catch their grandparents' attention. Me. Hiss. Woof. Ruff. Ella played with the kids for a short while before laying beside William's bed. Oliver had returned to William's shadow as he observed this family scene with an amused expression. I guess I need to find another souvenir for Mistress, Oliver thought as he looked at the golden snake who seemed to be enjoying her quality time with her new grandmother. Originally, he planned to take Dia back to Celine, but since the little guardian was born from William's blood, he thought that it was inappropriate to separate the 2 of them. I almost forgot. You'll need to form a contract with Dia and make her your animal companion, Oliver said in a serious tone. Thor and Ragnar are fine since you have already added them to your herd, but Dia is different. She is a snake and you can't add her to your herd no matter how hard you try. Why must I make her my animal companion? William inquired. Why are you wearing that collar on your neck? Oliver asked back. It was then that William understood Oliver's meaning. The collar on his neck was protecting him from being targeted by those who were thinking of making him a slave. Dia was a mythical creature. Although she was still young, it didn't change the fact that she would grow up to be a winged serpent in the future. Slavery was not exclusive to humans and other humanoids. Exotic creatures were also being sold in the black market, and Dia would certainly be a very nice addition to those who had the hobby of collecting rare and exotic creatures that were hard to find in the continent. What kind of contract should I make? William asked. I'm not familiar with how contracts are made. An equal contract, Oliver replied. This contract gives both parties equal standing. There is no master and servant relationship. This is the ideal choice for you and Dia, unless you are a scum who wants to treat Dia as a slave. How could I possibly do that? William snorted. Dia, come here for a second. Discover new chapters at novelb.co. Hiss. Dia stopped playing with her brothers and looked up at William in confusion. Come. I need to form a contract with you, so you won't get targeted by bad people. Hiss. Although she was still confused, Dia slithered and climbed up to William's bed. She then crawled up his body, then looped around the shepherd's neck like a good girl. Since William was devoid of magic power, Oliver was the one that facilitated the equal contract between the red-headed boy and the golden snake. 2 blue magic circles the size of a basketball ball hovered between William and Dia. Afterwards, Oliver pricked their bodies using the shadow dagger he conjured to get a drop of their blood. As the blood entered the magic circles he created, it changed its color and became golden. The 2 magic circles merged with each other and shot out 2 beams of golden light that shot towards William's and Dia's bodies. When the light receded, Oliver returned to William's shadow and announced that the equal contract had succeeded. With this, another layer of protection had been given to Dia to prevent her from being enslaved by others. As for Thor and Ragnar, they didn't need it because the moment they became part of William's herd, it was similar to having a binding contract. When William looked at the 2 puppies, he was surprised to see that both of them were already asleep. They were lying on Ella's tummy and slept peacefully. William could understand that feeling of comfort because he had done the same thing for almost his entire life. Seeing that her 2 brothers were sleeping beside their grandma, Dia decided to join them. She uncoiled herself from William's neck and slithered towards Ella. The golden snake then coiled herself up like a rattlesnake beside her brothers and slept. William and Ella exchanged a glance. The young boy smiled, and Ella's expression was gentle. Both of them were reminiscing about the days when William was still a baby. Suddenly, a knock was heard on the door. William stood up from the bed and personally opened it to see who it was. Good morning, Est greeted. You've recovered sooner than expected. Good morning. William returned the greeting as he opened the door wide and stepped aside to let his guests come inside the dormitory room. As always, Est had Ian and Isaac accompanying him. However, this time, it was not only the 3 of them. Wendy tagged along and she was carrying a picnic basket in her hand. I thought that you still might not have recovered and decided to bring you lunch, Wendy said in embarrassment. William smiled. Although I can walk and move my body, that doesn't necessarily mean that I can travel far. It's good that you brought me some lunch. I'm feeling very hungry. Thank you, Wendy. You're welcome. Wendy gave William a sweet smile as she entered the room. It didn't take long for the new arrivals to notice the 3 new creatures inside William's room. William introduced them as his guardian beasts, which made Est, Ian, Isaac, and Wendy look at him in a weird manner. It's complicated. William scratched his head. Oliver had warned him that he shouldn't tell anyone where Dia, Thor, and Ragnar came from because it might invite unnecessary trouble. Seeing the shepherd's troubled face, the guests decided not to make it difficult for him. Wendy's eyes widened as she looked at the 3 sleeping babies. All of them looked so cute and adorable that it melted her heart. However, the one that caught most of her attention was the baby husky, Thor. If not for the fact that Thor was sleeping peacefully, she would have begged William to let her hug the puppy. The red-headed boy looked at her infatuated gaze and sighed. It was very easy for him to read Wendy's intentions because she was a very straightforward person. You can play with him when he wakes up, William said while scratching his cheek. He's just a newborn, so he might get tired easily. I'm okay with that. Wendy replied hurriedly as if she was afraid that William would take back his word. After getting William's permission, Wendy happily brought out the food that she had taken from the Magic Division kitchen. Oliver, who was observing the guests from inside William's shadow, shook his head helplessly. This boy really knows how to attract the bees, Oliver thought. With just a glance, he could tell that the girl named Wendy had feelings for William. As for Est, and Ian, who was looking at the shepherd in a disgruntled manner, Oliver pretended that he didn't see anything. The parrot monkey was not someone who liked to divulge the secrets of others. He believed that since he had this kind of ability, he should also be more responsible when using it. It doesn't matter how many girls fall for your charms, Oliver mused as he closed his eyes to rest. He had already labeled William as the Prince of Darkness. Since that was the case, he only had to wait for a few more years for the prophecy to be fulfilled. Chapter 178, Turning the Dungeon Upside Down. The next day, William was feeling better, so he decided to join the morning training. Even though he had been resting since he had been brought back to the academy, the students of the martial class didn't slack off in their training. The dungeon outbreak made them realize that they were still not strong enough to handle every situation using their own power. Because of this, they paid extra attention to their daily training, which made Grant, Andy, and the rest of the instructors in the martial division very happy. Are you sure you're fit to join us? Priscilla asked. You don't have to force yourself, Sir William. Sir William. William turned his head to look at his vice prefect. It was the first time Priscilla called him Sir William. Usually, she just referred to him as head prefect. Priscilla nodded her head. We have all come to an agreement that the head prefect will be referred to as Sir William from now on. Please, don't reject it, Sir William. A/N. Usually, Sir is a term used to address knights in the Hellan Kingdom. William scanned the faces of the first years. They were all nodding their heads in agreement. Since that was what they decided, the red-headed boy decided to just go with the flow and smiled. Today, I have an important announcement to make, William said as he faced the first years who were listening to him attentively. I will introduce all of you to my new family members. The students had already noticed the 3 little creatures that were accompanying William. Even so, they didn't say anything and stared at them with curiosity. This beautiful golden snake over here is Dia. She is a girl, so she's shy around people. William introduced the snake that was looped around his neck as usual. This puppy on my left is Thor, and the one on my right is Ragnar. Aren't they cool looking? Thor and Ragnar both raised their chins in an arrogant manner. The way they acted was very similar to William when he was feeling narcissistic. Perhaps, they had inherited his traits due to the fact that his blood was flowing inside their bodies. From now on, they will be joining our martial division, William stated. I hope that all of you will get along with them. Now, let us begin our training. New STRIs at n/vel/b/i/n.co. Like always, William and the students started their training with stretching exercises. Afterward, they started to run towards the flag that was fluttering in the distance. The shepherd knew that he had just recovered, so strenuous exercises were bad for him. Because of this, he chose to ride Ella's back and oversee the training. Thor and Ragnar, on the other hand, ran alongside Ella and seemed to enjoy the morning activity. At first, William was quite worried that the puppies wouldn't be able to keep up, but he had underestimated them too much. Even though they were still young, Thor and Ragnar were mythical beasts. Just like baby dragons, they were on a level higher compared to creatures newly born to the mortal realm. The 2 puppies ran alongside Ella with their little legs as their tongues lolled at the side of their mouths. Dia, of course, stayed on William's neck as she watched everything around her with curiosity. After arriving at their destination, the martial students divided themselves into 10 teams and started to do their combat exercises. William's plan was to train capable commanders who would lead a team under their wing. This way, they would be able to mobilize as independent teams that would handle specialized roles. Take Dave as an example. He was the officer in charge of the logistics of the entire martial division. Naturally, his team would focus on managing the supplies of their small army. Priscilla's team was a scouting team, while Spencer's and Drake's teams would serve as the vanguard of the martial division. The other teams also had temporary captains who would either be promoted to commanders or assistant commanders in the future. Grant and Andy were also there, like usual, to oversee the training. The combat training they were focusing on was all about how to utilize their strengths and fight as a team instead of an individual. The dungeon outbreak had taught them that there was strength in numbers. Even Spencer and Drake, who had the soloist mentality, had started to change their perspective. This was what William wanted to see. The reason? He was quite lazy deep inside and just wanted to pass the responsibility to other people. When the morning training ended, everyone returned to the dormitory to take a break and prepare for their lessons for the day. Second Master, is there any news about Big Brother and Big Sister? William inquired. Although he looked calm, William was actually feeling very worried about them. It had been 3 days since he got the news that they went missing and he was quite anxious about their current situation. There's still no news, Oliver answered. Don't worry. Matthew and Leah are stronger than you. Also, your grandfather has arrived at the dungeon. It will only be a matter of time before he saves them. I hope that you are right, Second Master. William sighed as he looked outside the window of his room. I hope that you are right. The sound of monster shrieks echoed along the dungeon walls as Matthew and Leah fought side by side. Contrary to his scholarly image, Matthew was in fact a bat-lemage that specialized in hand-to-hand combat, while wielding the power of fire. Leah, on the other hand, was a summoner who had made a contract with a powerful water spirit. The weapon she wielded was an elemental whip that her father secretly gifted to her on her 16th birthday. It moved around as if it had a life of its own, slicing off the body parts of the monsters that it came in contact with in half. After the battle ended, the bodies of the lamias turned into particles of light, leaving black beast cores behind. Leah gathered these beast cores with the thought of purifying them after they had escaped from the dungeon. A day in the outside world was equivalent to 2 days inside the lair of the ancient queen. It had been 6 days since Matthew and Leah were trapped inside the dungeon, and they were having a hard time ascending to the upper floors where the exit of the dungeon was located. Since the dungeon was currently in the midst of a dungeon outbreak, the spawn rate of the monsters had increased tenfold. Matthew and Leah had to fight against the groups of monsters that they met along the way, which made their advance a very slow process. Also, after each battle they would have to immediately leave the vicinity so that they wouldn't attract other groups of monsters. This left both of them exhausted. Let's find a place to rest for the time being, Leah suggested. We can time our escape for when the monsters inside the dungeon decide to raid the surface. Okay, Matthew nodded his head in agreement. He was nearing his limit and it would be a good idea if they found a safe place to rest to recover their strength. It took them a while to find a good location, and the two immediately drank the potions they had prepared before they went to the Duchy of Aberdeen to fight against the dungeon outbreak. Both of them knew how dire their situation was, but neither of them felt that escaping the dungeon was impossible. The two hugged each other while paying attention to their surroundings as they meditated. It was then that they heard a rumbling noise not far from their location. What followed next was an earth-shaking roar that made both teenagers open their eyes in surprise. The dungeon floor shook as cries of alarm that came from over 100 dungeon monsters reverberated in the air. And then, everything became quiet. It was so quiet that they could hear the sound of footsteps coming towards their location. Matthew and Leah exchanged a glance as they readied themselves to engage in combat. It was then when a familiar old man appeared in front of them with a wide grin on his face. Am I disturbing the two of you? James asked with a mischievous expression. Matthew, you're doing well. Just do it a bit more and give me a great-grandchild as soon as possible. Leah's face flushed when she heard her grandpa James' words. Matthew on the other hand gave his grandpa the "you got it Gramps" look which made the old man's grin widen. Mordred also had a smile on his face as he looked at the pair of lovebirds. Seeing his son holding Leah in a protective embrace reminded him of the days when he was still courting Anna to be his wife. John just leaned against the dungeon wall, while Jekyll was flossing his teeth. It seemed that he had eaten a lot of monsters along the way and the dentist felt that this was a good opportunity to do some maintenance. Are you here to save us, Grandpa James? Leah asked. Her face was still beet red, but she wasn't the type to shy away from people whom she recognized as family. She had long regarded the Ainsworth family as her own family. That's the plan, James answered. However, the king has made an interesting decree and I think that it is worth it to work my old bone a little bit longer. Gramps, don't tell me. Matthew looked at his grandpa with excitement. James chuckled as he extended his hand to help the two teenagers to stand. Do you want to tag along? Me and the boys are planning to turn this dungeon upside down. Matthew and Leah exchanged a glance and smiled. They were quite curious about how James was planning to subjugate the dungeon with just the 6 of them. On that same day, the dungeon outbreak on the Duchy of Aberdeen ended, which surprised the king and the army that was stationed outside the dungeon. James swaggered out of the dungeon exit with a haughty look as Matthew, Leah, and the experts of Lant walked behind him. Tell the king that James of Lant had subjugated the dungeon, James announced in a booming voice. I will be waiting in anticipation for the rewards that he promised. He left along with Matthew and Leah with the intention of heading towards the academy. They were planning to pick up William and bring him back to Lant for a few days to participate in Matthew's and Leah's wedding ceremony. Chapter 179, Kenneth's Secret Part 1. Wendy's laughter resounded in the Marshall Division premises as she played tag with Thor. The dog happily ran after her, while the latter did her best to prevent the puppy from catching up to her. After the kids woke up from their sleep, during Est's and Wendy's visit, William introduced them to his friends. Wendy had become smitten with Thor the moment she laid her eyes on him. Because of this, she did her best to get in his good graces. Much to William's surprise, Thor seemed to really like Wendy as well, so the two of them hit it off right off the bat. Because of this, Wendy had decided to visit William wherever she had free time, so she could play with Thor. William chuckled as he threw a frisbee for Ragnar. The afternoon classes had just ended, so the red-headed boy decided to play with the kids. Wendy arrived just in time to join them and decided to play with Thor. William was about to throw the frisbee again when he saw someone enter the gates out of the corner of his eye. A look of shock appeared on his face when he saw the familiar faces that entered the premises of the Marshall Division. Big brother? Big sister? William laughed as he ran towards Matthew and Leah, who were standing beside his grandpa. I'm glad both of you are safe. William hugged both of them together, and the two hugged him back. We're back, William, Matthew said as he patted William's head. Sorry for making you worry. Leah patted William's back. James, on the other hand, was busy looking at Wendy. With just a glance, he could tell that the girl had feelings for William. He was laughing internally because his purpose for coming was to drag William to attend Matthew's and Leah's wedding ceremony. What he didn't expect was to find a future daughter-in-law candidate the moment he visited William in the academy. He didn't waste any time and approached the girl with a smile that would put all toothpaste models to shame. Hello, young lady. I am William's grandfather, James. James introduced himself with an award-winning smile that would make all the single ladies call him daddy. Feel free to call me Grandpa. Hello, Grandpa James, Wendy stuttered as she looked at the handsome gray-haired man that was oozing with charisma in front of her. Are you William's friend? Yes. Are you interested in becoming his fiancée? New estirise at n/vel/b/i/n. Co. Excuse me. You see, William might be mischievous, but he is really a good boy. James was like an experienced salesman who was about to scam a little girl to buy the wares he was selling. I call the shots when it comes to who William is going to marry, so if you are interested, how about we set a date to meet your parents? That way, we can discuss when and where the marriage will take place. Don't push me. William pushed James aside and immediately stood between him and Wendy. What are you babbling about, old man? Wendy, don't listen to Gramps. He is getting old and getting cynical. Usually, we tie him up with a rope back at home, so he doesn't bite people. Don't believe whatever nonsense he is saying. Oh, okay. Wendy nodded her head. She then gave William's grandpa a curious look. James felt her gaze and winked back at her. William saw this and snorted at his annoying grandpa. Why are you being so overprotective? Relax, I'm already old and have no intention of stealing your girlfriend. James teased. I am not Will's girlfriend, Wendy answered timidly behind William's back. I'm just his friend. It's fine, we can discuss this matter later. James' eyes glinted in delight when he heard the young lady call his grandson Will instead of William. Of course, he didn't make any further moves on Wendy because it would just incite William to contradict him. If you're not busy, come back with us to lunch for a few days, James said as he stood in front of the red-headed boy who was looking at him with vigilance. Why? Is something going to happen to Lant? William inquired. He knew that his grandpa wouldn't invite him to go back to his hometown without a good reason. James smirked and patted William's shoulder. Matthew and Leah are getting married. You should come with us to witness their wedding ceremony. William's jaw slackened as he looked at Matthew and Leah with a shocked expression. The two of you are getting married. Yes. Matthew grinned. Leah held Matthew's arm and winked at William. We are? Congratulations. William smiled and gave Matthew a thumbs up. Now we are truly going to be one big happy family. Worry about yourself, Matthew replied. He could see that his grandpa had set his eyes on the pretty girl beside William and understood that his cousin was going to have a headache for the next few days. So, are you going to come back with us? Or must I carry you kicking and screaming? James asked with a grin. If it's just a few days, I think I can go, William replied after careful consideration. I'll discuss this first with Instructor Grant and Instructor Andy. Okay, you do that. James nodded his head. Meanwhile, I'll have a talk with this pretty lady here. Yeah, no. William grabbed Wendy's hand and pulled her away. Mama, make sure that Gramps doesn't follow us. Me. Emma bleated and gave James the don't even think about it glare. The old man sighed and patted the Angarian's goat's head. It seems that you've forgotten who raised you when you were still just a kid. Me. Tell me more about that young lady. Ella lowered her head and poked James with her horns. Clearly, she had no intention of sharing any information with the annoying old man. Your grandpa sure is interesting, Wendy said once the two of them were out of earshot. He reminds me of my own grandfather back home. Believe me when I say that my grandpa is 10 times worse than yours, William snorted. Dia, who was coiled around his neck, was resting her head on William's head. Thor walked beside Wendy, while Ragnar walked beside William. Listen, Wendy. William looked at her with a serious expression. My Gramps has a bad habit of playing matchmaker. I already told you about the incident with my ex-fiancée Rebecca. Believe me when I say that he has already locked you in his sight and will do his best to convince you to become my girlfriend. When he does that, give him a firm rejection so that he will back off. Do you understand what I'm saying? Wendy nodded her head. She agreed with William on the surface, but the boy didn't know what she truly thought deep inside. Seeing her reaction, the red-headed boy thought that he had successfully gotten his message across and stopped holding her hand. Soon, the two arrived at the staff room where several of the instructors stayed when they were not teaching their classes. William went inside alone, while Wendy watched over Thor and Ragnar. At this exact moment, inside William's dormitory room, Kenneth was holding a round mirror in his hand. The mirror was made from an unknown crystal, and the frames at its side were inscribed with rune marks that were quite similar to the runes found on William's slave collar. The silver gray-haired boy muttered an incantation and the mirror glowed in response. Soon, an image of an elf with silver gray hair and blue eyes appeared on its surface. I am here to report about my target's current circumstance, Kenneth said. Very well, the elf nodded. I am going to record your report so I may pass it along to the elders, and the patriarch of the clan. You can start your report now. Chapter 180, Kenneth's Secret Part 2. Yesterday, I personally examined his body and didn't find any traces of magic whatsoever. Kenneth began his report. Aside from that, there is no sign that he had awoken any kind of spiritual powers. Even so, I still can't gauge how strong he is. You can't gauge how strong he is, the elf interrupted Kenneth's report. How can you not gauge his strength? Aren't you always with him? Yes. Kenneth nodded. I am always around him. When I used the clan's artifact to measure his strength, the results said that he was a Class D individual. Only Class D. The elf frowned. Isn't that a bit too weak? Then again, he's a half-elf. I guess this is to be expected of a filthy half-breed. A/N, filthy mudblood much. Kenneth tasted something sour in his mouth when the elf referred to William as a filthy half-breed using a contemptuous tone. Even so, he took hold of his emotions and put on a calm expression. Get your r18 at no/v/e/lbn.com. So, why did you say that you couldn't gauge his powers? It's because the feats that he has accomplished don't match his power level. Kenneth started to narrate everything that he had gathered about William, from the battle against Psoglov until the end of the dungeon outbreak. The elf listened patiently until Kenneth finished his tale. Isn't it very obvious? The elf asked in contempt. Or must I spell it out to you so that you can understand? The boy's strength is only subpar and his real strength relies on that goat he calls Ella. If you leave the goat out of the equation, he is just an ordinary half-breed that won't be able to achieve anything, even if he trained for years. Kenneth wanted to refute the elf's words, but the latter didn't give him an opportunity to do that. Based on your report, I can tell that the hybrid only relies on external forces to increase his battle prowess. Such a person doesn't amount to much when fighting alone. Continue your monitoring and report any changes that you see, the elf ordered. Remember, your purpose for going to the southern continent is to see whether he is the one rumored about in the prophecy. The clan has already dispatched others like you to different places in the central continent where rumors of strong individuals that had a hint of dark magic could be found. We need to find the Prince of Darkness and bring him to the Silver Moon continent before he awakens his power. This is the order from the patriarch of our clan. It still annoys me that we have to waste our resources to monitor a shepherd in the southern continent. He is not an ordinary shepherd, Kenneth said through gritted teeth. Don't forget whose son he is. The elf quieted down after hearing Kenneth's words. He also knew William's identity, and that was the reason why Kenneth was sent to personally monitor him in the academy. The son of the Saintess and the Dungeon Conqueror was an existence that shouldn't go unchecked. Just carry out your mission and report as soon as you find anything worth reporting, the elf ordered before the transmission was cut. You still haven't changed, father. Kenneth firmly gripped the mirror in his hand as he clenched his teeth in anger. When Kenneth heard that William was one of the candidates that was named by the patriarch, he immediately volunteered to be the one to monitor him. He had long heard about the half-elf that was born from the union of the Saintess and the hero of the elves. Kenneth wanted to see what kind of person William was. He didn't care if William was the Prince of Darkness or not. What he cared about was Lady Arwen, his teacher, who resided in the holy city of Nitfaethel. Before he left the Silver Moon continent, he promised her that he would watch over William and keep him safe. Arwen only giggled when she heard his promise. He still remembered her parting words on the day he was about to ride the ship bound to the southern continent. My son is a wolf in sheep's clothing, Arwen said with a smug look on her face. Go and meet him. Perhaps, you will learn a thing or two by staying by his side. May the blessings of the World Tree always shine upon you. Take care of yourself and let's meet again a few years from now. Kenneth returned the round mirror to his storage ring as he remembered his teacher's smiling face. Arwen and William had similar enough smiles that Kenneth sometimes found himself in a daze when the half-elf smiled at him. I hope that you're not the Prince of Darkness, William. Kenneth sighed in his heart. Because if you are, all the elves in the Silver Moon continent will do everything in their power to catch you. I don't want to see that happen. Kenneth walked towards the window as he gazed upon the east. Dark clouds loomed in the distance, as if to mark the coming of a storm. Oliver, who was hiding inside William's shadow, was not aware that the letter he had sent back to his master had been intercepted by the Rayleigh clan, who specialized in intelligence gathering and the making of prophecies. It was for this very reason that William had become a priority candidate on their list. If the parrot monkey had known that his arbitrary action years ago had set many things in motion in the Silver Moon continent, he would definitely kick himself out of anger because of his stupidity. Not only did he endanger William's life, he had also unintentionally broken the peaceful life that Celine had sought for during the years of her enslavement. After William got the instructor's permission to take a few days' leave from the academy, he hurriedly returned to his dormitory room only to find Kenneth staring outside the window. I am about to return to my hometown for a few days to participate in a wedding ceremony. Would you like to come with me? William asked. No, Kenneth shook his head. I will just wait for your return. There are still many things I need to do because our Sir William doesn't want to do his duties. William coughed lightly because he was guilty as charged. Well then, please, do your best, Mr. Secretary. Your Sir William is very unreliable. Go ahead and look for suitable candidates that can join our ranks. Kenneth gave him a sidelong glance and snorted. Go and return as soon as you can. Okay. William smirked and patted Kenneth's shoulder before leaving the room. In truth, Kenneth wanted to go with him, but he couldn't afford to meet Celine at this point in time. The elves of the Silver Moon continent had been keeping a close eye on two important individuals, and they were none other than Celeste and Celine, the twins that were mentioned in the grand prophecy of the Silver Moon continent. Although Celeste was most likely the bride stated in the prophecy, none of the elves dared to make their move on her in the small chance that they were wrong in their assumption. Because if they made a mistake, there was a chance that their entire race would be wiped out from the face of the world.